of comedy has been deconstructed, redefined and reimagined over the years, but for the original kings of comedy, we look to Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, the Marx Brothers and of course Laurel and Hardy. Through the heyday of silent movies to the birth of talkies, Stan and Ollie have been often imitated, but arguably never bettered. Before we count down their 10 greatest moments, here are some Stan and Ollie facts. With music I'm sure you're all going to recognise. The popular Simpsons catchphrase, "Don't!" has its origins in the Laurel and Hardy films. Scottish actor James Finlayson, who appeared in 33 of their films, would utter the now famous line in all his appearances.
I'll tell you what's wrong with you in 2 words. Impossible.
Both Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were accomplished actors before teaming up. Laurel had appeared in over 50 films, while Hardy had been in more than 250 productions.
In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia.
Members of the legendary English band The Beatles used cutouts of Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in the cutout celebrity crowd for the cover of their 67 album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Let bygones be bygones.
In 1909, during the early years of show business, Stan Laurel worked for Britain's leading comedy impresario Fred Karno as a supporting actor and as the understudy for the one and only Charlie Chaplin.
And don't forget, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Oliver Hardy's first on-screen appearance was in the 1914 comedy film Outwitting Dad. He was billed as Babe Hardy in the credits.
I brought you some hard-boiled eggs and some nuts.
Stan Laurel had once famously quipped, "If anyone at my funeral has a long face, I'll never speak to him again."
What are you going to do with that egg?
I'll bet you, Dolly, you can't put it in your mouth without breaking it.
As a team, Laurel and Hardy have appeared in 107 films, with the pair starring in 32 silent shorts, 40 sound shorts and 23 full-length features.
You're right. A little kindness goes a long way.
After Hardy's death in 1957, Laurel put his number in the phone book so fans could contact him. He also replied to all his fan mail by hand. And I've done that one. The world's only Laurel and Hardy museum is in Ulverston, Cumbria.
Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
And finally, Oliver Hardy was rejected for enlistment in the army during the First World War due to his weight.
Well, I couldn't help it. You told me I was doing your price and all the time.
So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is one that I have been looking forward to for I don't know when. And the gentleman that is going to be joining me for his hat-trick appearance. So he gets the match ball with this one. Comedian, writer, podcaster, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kevin Day is with us. Welcome back, Kevin.
Thank you, Pav. I don't know if I've said this to you before, but you give good montage. You really do a good montage. And you know what? It's a measure of how much I love Laurel and Hardy, but just hearing the background music in behind those is just there's a selection of 4 or 5. There's like the optimistic one and the poignant one, but they just make you smile. And those clips you played there, it's just you can't help but smile. And the 2 of these that I've done before, I've really enjoyed. But I have to say, much as I like Disney and Disney songs, and much as I adore Morecambe and Wise, and I do. This one's the most. I don't think I can do another one because this one has been very difficult because Laurel and Hardy are an incredibly important part of my first memory, my first actual childhood memory, as in my memory rather than a memory that someone's told you happened.
Yeah,
was sitting on my dad's knee. I must have been 3 or 4. My dad loved Laurel and Hardy, and my son loves Laurel and Hardy. But I remember sitting on my dad's knee watching Below Zero. It was my first ever Laurel and Hardy film, and it was snowing in Below Zero, and it was snowing outside our flat.
Oh right.
And I remember thinking, I don't think I could be happier than that moment. I distinctly remember thinking that as a kid. So I adored my dad, God rest him, and so being on your dad's knee and listening to your dad laugh, and it somehow being snowing outside as well as on the telly was just like, this is fantastic. So. Laurel and Hardy, I think Laurel and Hardy do that to millions of people, but they do. And as we'll discover, just technically as well, I mean, they are just so good. I mean, all those people you mentioned, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, the Marx Brothers, along with other people like Harry Langdon and Harold Lloyd,
Harold Lloyd, yeah.
people like Paul Merton will argue, and he does, and we do, that Charlie Chaplin is the greatest of all time. I would argue that Laurel and Hardy, but more particularly Stan Laurel, I would argue is the greatest because Stan was so involved in the making of the films.
Yeah.
And, Ollie, God love him, Ollie was by all accounts the nicest person you could ever meet, and he knew he was funny, and he knew that if he twiddled his tie, people would laugh. But basically, he couldn't wait for the whistle at 3 o'clock so he could get off to either play golf or go horse racing. He was a massive gambler.
He was, yeah.
Whereas Stanley was a workaholic and Stanley was just obsessed with making comedy films. And
He was a connoisseur of he was. I read some things and I got to thank you, Kevin, because it was your kind of idea to do Laurel and Hardy moments, and I've really, over the last couple of weeks when I was putting my top 10 together, I hadn't watched Laurel and Hardy for quite a while, and I started delving myself back, and it's only when you delve yourself back that, again, I was the same. It was my BAMP was who first. He had an old, it wasn't even Super 8. What was it before Super 8? Just 8mm camera with some silent Laurel and Hardy films on there, and I must have been about 3 or 4 again, watching this fat guy and this thin guy, and just it's like cartoons, isn't it? It's silent, so it's totally visual.
Yeah.
And falling in love with these two guys, and again, I suppose if it had been a Three Stooges film or it had been the Mark, I would have fallen in love with them rather than Laurel and Hardy. But it was also when I'm assuming the same with you, Laurel and Hardy, especially the short 20-minute movies.
Yeah.
For me, was time off from school.
Yeah.
Because it used to be summer holidays, Christmas especially, in the morning. You'd have Flash Gordon. Kids, just look it up. It was Larry Buster Crab with Flash Gordon, a Laurel and Hardy short, or they'd have it on at like 5:40 in the evening, just before the news on BBC Two.
Well, it's interesting. I don't think you can fall in love with the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges, or indeed Charlie Chaplin, in the way that you can fall in love with Stan.
No, I completely agree.
You can be a huge fan, and of course you can, but I don't think you ever feel that same affection. And oddly, between about 1955 and 1965, there was all the Laurel and Hardy films were out of copyright for some reason. Now they're all back in this license. So they were a cheap schedule filler for BBC in particular.
Right.
So as you say, every weekend there'd be a Laurel and Hardy film, and so and then they became available through DVDs, so you could watch them easier. But my generation grew up watching Laurel and Hardy the same way we watched Magic Roundabout or Pogue's Wood or Scooby Doo later on. So it was part of that thing, and also because I think we'll talk about this later. There is a certain childlike element, although we'll also talk about the fact there's some quite dark humor in there as well.
Oh, very.
But there is a certain child, because they were two big kids essentially, even though they were quite often married and quite often running their own business. And every now and again, Ollie would be a millionaire for no apparent reason. So clearly they were capable of doing these things. But in a way, they were adults in the way that Tom Hanks was an adult in Big. And I think as a kid, you're just intrigued by these two people doing things that you can imagine other kids doing. And it's astonishing what you say. And I love Bamps. That's a great name.
Yeah.
But so many people talk to me or tell me that their memories of Laurel and Hardy begin with watching it with somebody older, who presumably may have remembered watching. I spoke to somebody recently who saw them live, and it's like I couldn't stop touching him. It's just like he'd seen this man's eyes had seen Stan and Ollie in the flesh.
Apparently, my nan and Bamp went to the Wyvern in Swindon because they were playing. Well, the Stan and Ollie movie. It was like when they were older, obviously, because that was when they came over. So they were not in their prime, but they went to the Wyvern Theatre in Swindon. I think it was Swindon. I'm sure it was. That's what they told me. Yeah. And they went and saw like Laurel and Hardy. I mean, just saying those words, Laurel and Hardy live, must have been just amazing.
Well, oddly enough, that the Laurel and Hardy film, the one with Steve Coogan, is a very good film.
Yeah,
but it's factually incorrect in that they sold out every ticket.
I bet they did.
The two 1947, I think 1952 is the tour they're talking about. When the plot is that they're struggling to sell tickets, they didn't struggle to sell tickets at all. The people of England and Ireland and France absolutely adored them, and by all accounts, the shows. If you read review, because the American press, even though Laurel and Hardy made a lot of money from the films. The American press, Variety in particular, were quite sniffy about Laurel and Hardy. They didn't think Laurel and Hardy had the sophistication of Harold Lloyd, for example, or the revolutionary fervour of Charlie Chaplin. But the press in this country absolutely adored them. And when you read the reviews of the live show, even Kenneth Tynan, the famous acerbic, acidic Observer reviewer, he went to see them and he said they deserved the accolade because he said some of it was creakingly corny, but they did it so well. And he refused to criticise anybody who brought such good nature and goodwill to the audiences. And people in this country adored them. And they would literally, like when they arrived at Victoria Station, the police had to be called to clear a path for them. And Ollie was such a nice. Well, they were both really, really nice blokes. I mean, they had issues with women. I mean, Stan was married 8 times to 4 different women, which is really bizarre. And Stanley loved a drink, and Ollie again was married 3 times. So they weren't saints by any means, but they were legendarily, both of them were really, really nice chaps.
Yeah.
And it took ages for them to get anywhere because they were happy to talk to everybody after it. So, but just meeting somebody who'd see, and your band saw them live. I mean,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's
absolutely
amazing.
Crazy. Because the other thing was like when I was younger, my mum used to work in a pub on a Friday night, so that was my time with my brother and my dad, and we had a videotape where we taped all of the 20-minute. So we had Blotto,
wow,
Bratz. So
brilliant.
that used to be. It was like religious on a Friday. Mum has gone, let's put Laurel and Hardy on, and we'd spend there watching 2 or 3 hours of Laurel and Hardy, and it becomes like a lot of things when you're younger, like it is with Star Wars for me. It becomes part of your DNA. And I find myself even now saying things in just normal daytime where I will, if I've got a £5 note, 5's the smallest I've got, sir. And it's, any of these little. You'll see these little things that you think that's from Laurel and Hardy. That is, that's something that is in what I say every day.
I always say recommember. Recommember.
Okay, yeah.
Which we talked about later on, but it's interesting as well. You talk about watching it with your dad and your brother, because I think Sons of the Desert, the global fan club, which has got a huge membership.
Me and my brother were members.
Well, there you go, brilliant. But they will tell you that there are an awful lot of women members. But I think anecdotally, they tend to appeal to men and boys more than
I think so.
Women, I think. You speak to other female comics, for example, and as understandably as well, because we'll talk about women characters later on, but women characters tend to be a nuisance in Laurel and Hardy films. They tend to be stopping them having fun.
Yes.
Or they're nagging them, or they're murderesses. There's a lot of knife-wielding maniac women in Laurel and Hardy films.
There is.
So I can understand why women don't see anything in them that particularly appeals to them. And I think it was a particularly boyish. So, I mean, the other big thing with Laurel and Hardy is it's impossible not to be able to do some sort of impression of them.
Exactly. When you are bigger boned as well than some people, I think it's nice that you've got an Oliver Hardy you can fall back on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, although you wouldn't want to have the Hitler moustache now because that's not particularly PC. But I went through a phase of looking at this imaginary camera and like breaking a fourth wall.
Doing the double take.
Yeah. I just went through a phase, and I'm not looking in a camera, but I would do that thing where I would look at like this imaginary camera and have this either disappointed face or, like you say, the double take. It's just ridiculous, but it's weird how it seeps into your everyday.
Yeah.
And even so, I mean, even with popular culture, you look at Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons basically are sort of like Laurel and Hardy, but at an ultra level of violence. But the stuff that they're doing, and again, I was watching some of them, Busybodies, I think it is, the one when they're in the woodwork, and some of the stuff. And I don't know about you, Kevin. You probably know because your encyclopedic knowledge of comedy. But like I'm assuming there wasn't things like health and safety on the sets in like the 1920s and 30s. So people are falling down. The live ghost, which is where Stan and Ollie Shanghai a load of sailors. And there's that scene where there's a pile of bodies. And then from like 10 feet up, another body just comes falling down. And they're not dummies. They're real people that are falling. And it looks horrendous. People must have broken bones and chipped teeth and God knows what.
Well, the giant buzzsaw in Busybodies is a real giant buzzsaw. There's no cartoons added in or plastic blades. That's a proper actual working lumberyard.
Yeah.
All that thing. But Busybodies is a classic example of what happens in a lot of those films. The escalation towards mutual destruction.
Exactly.
Where they all just go along with it. It all just starts with a perfectly. Somebody will accidentally hit somebody with a plank of wood, and instead of apologising and say, "I'm sorry about that," they'll get hit back by another plank of wood, and then something will fall on their head, and then they'll throw something on, and it just builds up. But they just stand there and take it. It's like in that film where I think it's Charlie Hall. I don't know if it's done to Ollie or already does it, but dips a paintbrush in glue, sticks it on his chin, and then cuts the handle off. But they just stand there and let it happen. It just makes you laugh even more because the fact is, well, the other thing is because Stan never really liked the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges because he thought the violence was too violent.
Yes.
Whereas in Laurel and Hardy films, I think even as a kid, no actors are getting hurt in this violence. This is proper cartoon comedy violence. Because even sometimes you watch Tom and Jerry, which again I love. And every now and again, I watch it now, and you kind of wince because
absolutely.
Tom gets an anvil in his face. You think, oh my Christ, how's he getting out of that?
Yeah.
But in Laurel and Hardy, that very rarely happens. It's all fairly low rent, and it does. Ollie gets run over by pianos, and it always happens to Ollie. But it's just, and again, the way the fact that they're both dimwits, but Ollie doesn't know he's a dimwit.
No.
And Ollie thinks he's a superior, and Ollie. I love the fact that each film is a separate entity, that each film starts again, because you'd think Ollie would know never to go into a room first, because he always insists that he goes into the room first. And we know that something's going to happen to him when he goes into the room first, but he still does it because he thinks he's the slightly more intelligent one out of these two dimwits, and that status thing is great. It's interesting you mentioned the size as well, because there wasn't that much of a difference in their size. Ollie was 6'1" and Stan was 5'10".
Oh, right.
And at times when you look at Ollie, it's only later on that he's probably obese. He's always big, but he was never. They were happy to be the thin one and the fat one. He didn't bother Ollie at all. But he was big in the way that an American footballer is big, rather than, and because he was always a brilliant dancer.
That's
right. He was very nimble.
Yeah.
So in the later films, which we're not going to discuss, that's when he does get really big. But in their heyday, there wasn't that much difference between them.
He was always sort of light of foot, wasn't he? He was always very graceful.
Very graceful, very dainty.
Very dainty. But I think it was because he was his early career, he just played the baddie, didn't he? In a lot of the silent movies. But I think it's great that they managed to get together because they do complement each other so much. And it's the fact that Oliver Hardy thinks that he is the superior.
Yeah.
And what you said, the one thing I noticed from watching a lot of these over the last couple of weeks was it's the tiniest thing, and you can just see that Stan Laurel is saying, right, I need to switch this light on. What can I do that's funny about just switching a light on? Yeah. And the fact that it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work. I unscrew it. I light the thing, and then gas starts shooting out of it. And it's just, and like you say, and then it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger to the point that like all four sides of a house falls down. Yeah. Or it's just. I mean, I think genius is probably not a big enough word.
Yeah.
For those guys, but it's. I think it's the fact that they're idiots. I think everybody knows a time when they've dropped something or they've put something where they shouldn't have done or they've done something stupid. I think that's one thing that makes you appreciate them a lot more than say someone like. I've never understood why when I listen to Americans talk about comedy on podcasts, and they always mention the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers. They never mention Laurel and Hardy. It's always like they're just a forgotten duo.
Well, that's strange as well because they will mention Abbott and Costello
exactly,
and they will mention Jerry Lewis
Yeah.
and Dean
And Dean
Martin,
Martin,
Dean
yeah,
Martin,
yeah.
for example. I think what happened, uh, and cleverer people than me have put this forward as a reason, is that the war, the Second World War, changed America, and Stan was aware of that as it was happening. Stan predicted that they wouldn't come out of the Second World War being at all popular because they were modest, gentle people, if you like. They weren't winners.
No.
And after the Second World War, what America wanted was brash. They wanted physical, because they'd won the war. The country was awash with money. They wanted conspicuous consumption. They didn't want these two. Basically, in some of their films, these guys are hobos.
Yeah.
They're sharing a bed because they were making the films in the middle of the Depression, and many of the people in the audience would share beds. In some of the films, they're penniless, and Americans didn't want that anymore. They wanted big brash stuff. They wanted people properly getting slapped around the face. They wanted people being laughed at because they looked strange. And Stan and Ollie kind of faded out of the American memory. And then they had a sort of revival in the late 50s, as I say, when the films came out of copyright. But that didn't last long in America because, again, the 60s was a very brash decade in America.
Exactly.
And they did. So they never fully recovered. They've always been more appreciated. Like in France, for example, the people of France love Laurel and Hardy, still do. In Germany, they're huge. Dick and Duff in Germany, but I think in this country, they're probably more appreciated than they are in the States. And what's interesting, and I was never more proud. I made a mistake with my son, with Ed, who's a comic now, when I took him to Palace too early. Right, when Ed was born, I couldn't wait to take him to his first Palace game, and he was not much more than a baby when I first took him, and he just wasn't. It wasn't the right thing to do, and it was too noisy, and it put him off.
Yeah, yeah.
So I deliberately, because again, the other thing is I can't wait. I want it to snow so I can show Ed below zero, and he can be on mine there. But and Ali was like, no, don't force him, don't, whatever you do. And then Ed, at the age of sort of 5 or 6, Ed found Laurel and Hardy by himself,
Oh, right.
and we had some of our, and even now, I was struggling with it, not struggling with this yesterday, but really finding it hard to narrow it down. And Ed and I sat down for an hour, and Ed went through some stuff, and he told me what his top 10 would be, and it was just fantastic. And it was odd because Ali, my wife, is going away on tour last night. She's going away for a while, and technically we should have spent the last hours just being together, but it's like the scene in the film when they end up doing the jigsaw rather than get married.
Yeah.
Because Ed and I are just putting our heads together around this
Your
table.
poor wife, she's going to go, that fucking top 10 podcast, I'm telling you, it's really getting between us.
Because she knows she likes to phone me at a certain time, so she just went, oh, well, are you doing that top 10 pod tonight? She said, I'll leave it till after 9 o'clock then. All right, darling.
Yeah, tomorrow morning with the way that we go. We must get her on as a guest and do a top 10. Just to be, so we can enclose her into the group,
Yeah, the trouble is it would be top 10 Cure songs.
Oh God, no.
Exactly, which I wouldn't be able to listen to.
We,
top 10 Elbow songs, There's that thing, there's that old joke that the shortest period of time is between a New York traffic light changing and someone sounding the horn.
Right.
With me, it's between a Cure song coming on the radio and me getting to the radio to turn it off.
Right.
The Cure and Elbow are two things that we don't agree on.
We've already done top 10 Manchester-based songs with Kieran.
With Kieran, of course, yeah.
And that was ready to slit your wrists after numbers 8 and number 7. But
if you think I take this seriously, Kieran was in spreadsheet heaven. Kieran was a mess for 3 days because he just felt really guilty about all the songs he left out. He was wanting to personally apologise for all the bit. He loves the Cure.
I know.
I know they're not from Manchester. Oh God, he loves
crazy.
the Cure.
It's funny you say about narrowing it down and how hard a job it was. I mean, this has been without a shadow. So this will be episode 139. This has been the hardest one for me to narrow down. It could have been top 50 easily. Yeah. And the more I watched more bits, I thought, shit, that needs to be in. That needs to be in. And in the end, I'm still not happy with my top 10. I still feel I could go on.
I'll be honest with you, Pav. I feel the same way. So I kind of went for a top 10 that illustrated certain characteristics. Because what I had to do in the end was forget all the silent stuff. I'll just ignore the silent stuff.
Yes.
And then I thought, well, in that case, let's ignore the the stuff when they'd left the Hal Roach Studios, sort of 1939 onwards. Let's ignore that because that doesn't reflect them. So all mine are sort of 1929 to 1938. And the other thing with the silent ones as well is they're not. Obviously, Paul Merton prefers the silent ones because he's a connoisseur, but the silent ones are very strange because Stan was a silent movie star in his own right before Ollie played a heavy in a film called Lucky Dog, which is where they first met in 1922, I think, maybe earlier.
I think it was.
Yeah, something like that. But when you watch the early ones, Stan, they look strange because Stan's makeup is so pronounced because Stan had a really strange color because he had flaming red hair, very, very ginger hair.
Oh, right.
Which early film stock didn't like. But he also had very pale blue eyes.
See, now that's what I was going to ask you, is because so did he wear contacts? Like,
well, it's one of those things. Hal Roach always said that people exaggerated, but I don't think he wore contacts, but he certainly, until film stock improved, sort of around 1929, 30, they certainly had to really. It looks like he's wearing. He looks like it could be in The Cure. Basically, he's got huge, massive eyeliner and mascara because his eyes were so pale blue that they just disappeared on film. So in the silent films, he doesn't look like Stan to me in the silent films. And to be perfectly honest, it's only when, and I appreciate the how good the silent films are, but it's, for me, they're not Laurel and Hardy. They're not.
No, I agree.
Because the silent films need only just that montage you play. It needs the music. It needs the music behind it. It needs the sound effects because again, they were so clever at not always showing. So if Ollie fell down the stairs, you didn't always see it, but you certainly heard it. Which is always much funnier than not seeing it. And then Ollie emerges with a black eye or his tire skew. Yeah. So for me, it needed the sound, and also, of course, in the silent films, you don't get the beautiful singing because Ollie was a wonderful, wonderful singer. Could have been a professional singer.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, I was I watched the Lucky Dog because somebody on the honourable mentions on X mentioned it, so I had a look at it, and it is striking because he doesn't. You almost see through his eyes, Stan, because they're just so light. And then I was trying to look on the it is the Hal Roach. I think that's the heyday, isn't it? The Hal Roach. Well, James Parrott directed the majority of the great ones.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Stan's looks as well is that's why he became obsessed with. He was always obsessed with the mechanics of comedy, even when he was a live performer. He grew up. So his dad ran a music hall, so he grew up watching the music hall that his dad ran in Glasgow. He used to bunk off up to Glasgow to watch stuff. So he grew up with musical artists. As you said, he was Charlie Chaplin's understudy. That's how he went to America for Akana's army. But when movies became a thing, Stan didn't think he would be able to act in them because of the way he looked, which is why he became obsessed with the mechanics of comedy, which is why he got into the idea, how could you make a film better by editing? How could you use various effects? Because Stan, uncredited, worked on most of the films, either with the editor or as the editor, and he worked on the script. A lot of them were improvised as they went along. So Stan was involved in the process of making each film to the nth degree in a way that Ollie wasn't. So Stan never really expected that he'd also be able to be involved on stage as well. So which is why he became obsessed with every part of the process. And there were two films that he produced himself, Our Relations, which is the one where they play
each other's wives
plus each other's evil brothers, and but also he produced Way Out West, so he was responsible for just about everything in Way Out West, which is
right.
I think most people would have Way Out West as it's probably the film certainly for non-Laurel and Hardy fans, people who like comedy. If you mention Laurel and Hardy, they probably go to Way Out West as their go-to Laurel and Hardy film.
Yes, I think any youngster would know who Laurel and Hardy is because that became like a TikTok meme, wasn't it? The dance, and then people put different like beats and sounds behind it. So people may not know Laurel and Hardy, but they would know that particular scene.
Yeah, funny enough, we went to. It's one of my happiest memories. Actually, it's about 15 years ago now. There was a remix of Way Out West was released by Avalon. Funnily enough, evil comedy agents, but they got involved, and of course, it's the Avalon boys who sing "Commence the Dancing."
That's right.
Which we'll come on to, but Frank Skinner did a speech to open it because Frank's obsessed with Laurel and Hardy, and Frank always said that whenever he started going out with a new girlfriend, he would show them that scene when they dance outside the saloon bar.
Yeah.
And if they didn't laugh, he'd end the relationship. So
Really?
yeah, because he just thought we have nothing in common. Basically.
What a great barometer for a relationship that is.
I know, yeah.
That is fantastic. Okay, so before we actually start, we've got a new little feature now. So we're going to do this.
Lisa's Challenge.
What the fuck are you saying?
Okay, so what basically this is we need to work out, or you need to tell me how many duplicates we're going to get in our top 10.
Oh.
Okay, and I'll say the same, and then we'll find out at the end of this how many you think it's going to be.
Right, okay. Well, I think, I reckon it might be quite a high number because for various reasons I've gone for some of the standouts. I reckon it could be as high as 6.
Ooh, okay. Okay, so you're going to go 6. I'm going to go a little bit lower than that. I'm going to go, because there's so many moments, I'm going to go, because I think there's some that are like just everybody has to put a certain ones of these in. I'm going to go 4, okay? I'm going to say 4. And we will get on to doing our top 10, obviously. Firstly, I will say congratulations to you as well for Palace beating Liverpool 1-0. As we're recording this was the last... I don't want us to start drifting off into football talk, but congratulations on that.
Do you know what? It was... I'd say it's all the better for being unexpected, but that last 5 minutes was a tense 5 minutes. But actually, the week before, we played really well against Man City in the first half until Man City realised what was going on and just stepped on the accelerator and were brilliant. But that was... And that's that classic thing as well. I've been working with a lot of them. For some reason, and have I got news for you, there's a lot of Liverpool fans.
Right.
Proper fans. They actually go to games. And it's just... I do that thing, which is even worse than laughing at them. It's I've been doing that thing with I don't mention it.
You just
don't say anything until I wait to see how long it takes them to crack, and they have to go, yeah, well done, good result. So you go, oh yeah, oh thank you, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was really pissed off on Sunday, and then I thought to myself, I don't know any Palace fans, and I thought, oh well, there's Giles, Paley Phillips, and
Giles
there's
lovely
you.
job.
So
yeah.
I thought, okay, let them have their moment, bless them. That's their moment for the season, so that's great.
Well, do you know what? I've always had this theory that I think every club has got one fan, and it's their superstitions and their rituals that matter. And if we could find out which Palace fan it was, and say, right, you have to have 3 pints of Guinness, and then you have to leave the pub. But I've always think every time we win, I think it's good karma from Giles Paley Phillips because he's such a decent bloke.
Absolutely.
I think that's the universe giving Giles something back.
Yeah, and why not?
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
Well, he's so lovely, but I've run out because he does that lovely tweet every week where he sends out
every Friday
where he sends good wishes to lovely people. And I don't know how to respond anymore. The like button on my phone's not working, so I can't do it. So I keep having to find ways at the moment, I'm working through Irish blessings and responding that way.
Right.
I don't want to not respond because it feels churlish to not respond to.
You're absolutely right. And also for me,
Well,
Friday is kind of like I kind of get the feeling of what it must be like waiting to see if you've been picked for the England squad, because you want to see if you're on that list. And when you get it, you go, yes, made it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put a little gif there of Keanu Reeves saying thank you or something, just that you made the list,
Yeah, well, this won't mean anything to many of the people listening to this, but I've started to get the hump that other people are on it, and I'm going, who's this? Who's Ellis Stender when he's at home? Who's that? Who's Bonnie? I don't know Bonnie. Why is Bonnie getting thanked as well?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Okay, right, here we go with the top 10. We might have a little quiz in the middle of it as well, but. Hit us with your number 10 then, Kevin.
All right, we might have to have a little toilet break as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're at that age. Don't worry. Don't worry about that.
Number 10 is, I doubt if this should be on your list. It's the Laurel Hardy murder case from 1930.
Okay.
And the reason I've chosen this is because it has one of my favourite bits of dialogue. So I want to I'm very keen throughout this process to illustrate how good Laurel and Hardy were with words as well as physical stuff.
Absolutely.
Because in a final analysis, the comedy I love is the word stuff as much as the slapstick stuff. But also, I just want to illustrate, as I mentioned before, that Stan had this kind of quite cheerful attitude to death and suicide and ghosts. Because Stan had this his attitude to life was you should live it to the full, which he absolutely did, and not worry too much about what's going to happen after. So, the Laurel and Hardy murder case is one of several films in which this one turns out to be a dream sequence. Spoiler alert, but. It involves them going to a haunted house for the reading of a will, because Ollie finds a newspaper which said the Ebenezer Laurel will is being read out tonight, and decides that Stanley is obviously one of the legatees. You know? And again, it turns out that there's a homicidal female who wants to kill everyone. But so Ollie says to Stan, you had an uncle, didn't you, Laurel? And Stan says yes. And Ollie says, is he living? And Stan says no. He fell through a trapdoor and broke his neck. And Ollie says, was he building a house? And Stan went, no, they were hanging him. Which is actually quite.
That's dark.
It's quite a dark joke. And again,
dark.
In Way Out West, when Lola, the owner of the bar, is pretending to be the woman that Stan and Ollie are giving the deeds to the will to, and Lola says to Stan, "Tell me about my dear daddy. Is it true that he's dead?" And Stan says, "Well, I hope so. They buried him."
Yeah.
Which and it's the fact that it's coming out of Stan's mouth. You don't kind of. It's really big. In Laughing Gravy, which we'll come on to, the landlord kills himself.
Yeah.
At the end, because
that's right, just a single gunshot.
There's a single gunshot you hear at the end, because it seems that he might have to spend more time with these people because of blockheads as well, which will come onto the joke where Ollie thinks Stan's lost his leg.
Yeah,
these are really dark jokes, and as you say, the ghost one, when they Shanghai the
live ghost,
live ghost,
yeah,
ghosts turn up in a lot of things, and they're quite gruesome, and they've got the proper sound effects. And there's one we'll turn to, Dirty Work, where the butler in the house they were in just says somewhere an electric chair is waiting.
And he's quite ghoulish as well, isn't
he?
Really,
really ghoulish. But I think it also reflects the time when, like we say, during the classic years of Laurel and Hardy, if you say from 1929 to 1937, a time of great unemployment in America, a time when people would have been malnourished and would have been desperate for work and probably would have been dying. So it kind of reflects a kind of shrug your shoulders attitude to life and death that people, and the discussion we had about how they lost their popularity in the 50s and 60s, those things weren't an issue in America.
Exactly. Yeah, it was more flower power and
the fact that you could starve to death if you didn't get a job wasn't on the money. But because there are plenty more examples as well. Because sometimes I do hear, and I can understand why people think it's a valid criticism. They'll say, "Oh, Laurel and Hardy's soft, or it's airy fairy, or they're too gentle." They're not. They really
disagree with that completely. Yeah. It's weird because what you say. If you look at Laurel and Hardy, and I think a lot of people look at Laurel and Hardy and exactly what you say, they think that they're a bit vanilla and they're a bit soft.
That's the word, yeah.
And they're a little bit U certificate, which all of their stuff seemed to be U certificate, if I remember. But if you delve in, there's a lot of darkness. Like you said, there's a live ghost. I mean, they accidentally shoot somebody, or it is suitcases, but they think it's a body. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of murder. There's a lot of well, even with things like the car being cut in half by a bandsaw, and there's so much stuff in there that you think that people will be dying all the time in this world. Being not run over by cars, or it's just ridiculous how much violence there is in there.
Well, hang on, I'm just going to check the name of where is it? Because we'll come to it. But there's one film which ends with Stan and Ollie having their legs ripped off and tied around their neck by a criminal.
Right. Okay.
It's their evidence that sent the criminal.
Right. Live ghost. They have their heads turned north to south because they said that they saw a ghost. It's ridiculously violent, but
yeah.
It's very. I mean, and also with the fact that it's not like we're talking about like 70s Francis Ford Coppola movies or whatever. This is the 1920s, 1930s. The other thing as well, you was talking about it earlier on about how Stan was so involved in the editing and stuff. They must have been so ahead of their time in regards to editing, special effects in movies, just the way that they shot some stuff. It was like way ahead of its time. It felt to me.
Well, that's really interesting because their last sound film, Thicker Than Water, has got an effect where, and oddly, I went to see a Henry IV Part 1 the other night with Ian McKellen, and they used the same trick in it because in Thicker Than Water, as each scene ends, Stan draws a screen across the screen
right. Yes.
to end the screen, and it on the screen that he's putting across, it's got the next scene on it, which was way ahead of its time in those days. Again, in unaccustomed as we are, their first sound film, their first actual sound film, they spent ages making it because Stan didn't just want to have them talking. He wanted to right, we've got sound, let's use it, which is why there's not actually that much dialogue in it, but what there is some brilliant off-screen sound effects because he really uses effects in a clever way. I think it's going to annoy me, the name of that film, Going Bye Bye, I think, when they get their legs strapped. Anyway,
right.
But no, they were really, and obviously to us, the effects look a bit shonky now, but at the time, these would have been at a time when sound on film was still novelty. Some of the sound effects and visual effects that Stan and Ollie were doing were fantastic, and of course also the stuff what Stan used to call the white magic, that when he created a flame by flicking his thumb. And a scene in Blockheads where they're going down the stairs, and on each landing there's a shadow of a blind.
That's right.
And Stan pulls the shadow of the blind down and closes it.
Yeah.
Which of course utterly amuses Ollie, but because when Ollie tries to do it, nothing happens until he turns around and the blind goes up again. But there's all that sort of effect, which were. I mean, they look simple, but they're actually really. The lighting is fun effect. It's a really clever effect, and magicians tell you now it's quite a difficult thing to do.
And then Blockheads is when he's got the pipe in using his hand as a pipe. And actually drawing smoke. He's got smoke coming out. Ridiculous how he's doing that.
We also made. I mean, it's funny in itself. It's a brilliant effect, but made more funny by Ollie watching it, being totally bemused by it, and then trying to do it himself. And it just.
So good. Well, that's a great one to start with. Okay, my number 10. I'm going for it is one particular moment, but it's in Any Old Port when Stan has his boxing match, and it's Walter Long is the guy that he fights against, and basically Stan and Ollie are down on their luck. Obviously, they need some money, so Ollie runs into one of his old friends who's a boxing promoter, gives him $50. And there's a lovely scene where they haven't had anything to eat for ages. Ollie goes to this sort of cart and says, "Oh, good morning, sir. Yeah, I want a steak. I want a pork-roast steak. I want baked potato." And then Stan says, "And I'll have the same." "You can't have the same. Why not?" "Because you're fighting tonight." And, and so he goes along and has this fight with this big bruiser. And it's the fact that you can tell that Stan's quite podgy as well. When you see him with his shirt off, he's quite he's quite podgy. But the guy that he's fighting is this big bruiser with the flat nose and the cauliflower ear. And I think they have some kind of run in before, don't they? I think the two of them, because the bruiser decides to get his boxing glove loaded with nuts and bolts
and a horseshoe
and in the end they're having a fight and they sort of get mixed up and both the gloves come off, and then Stan picks up his, and all of a sudden the bruiser is like scared shitless of Stan, and it's Ollie's look on his face because he's made a bet with somebody that Stan's going to lose. And that whole boxing match is just so funny.
Well, it just illustrates how they go along with the unreality of the situation. Because when Stan ends up in the ring with this guy, first of all, he just holds on to him for dear life.
That's right.
With everyone booing and the referee trying to separate them, and then Stan just runs away.
Yeah,
but he runs away around the ring.
Yeah,
and in real life, the guy fighting him would have just sort of stepped across and punch him. But instead, in Laurel and Hardy world, he runs after him
Yeah.
around the ring as well. And then there's that brilliant thing where the guy's waving his arm to do a haymaker, and then the horseshoe drops out, and then Stan picks up the wrong glove, and the horseshoe's in it. And the guy realizes, and it's just Walter. It was Walter Long in Going Bye Bye. He was him who tied their legs around their necks.
Right.
He was the heavy in a lot of.
Yes.
And apparently him and Ollie got on really well because Ollie understood how difficult it was to play the role of the heavy, and they always tried to give Walter Long a couple of lines to make him look like he might be a decent bloke if he wasn't trying to kill Stan and Ollie, basically.
But he just had one of those faces, didn't he? That Walter Long. He was just a bruiser. You could tell that he was a bad guy.
Yeah. And he also, the thing is, he clearly relished playing that part as well. I think when you get to you probably reach a certain age where you think, I'm not going to be the romantic lead, so I might as well take all the. It's like Vinnie Jones,
Exactly.
Guy Ritchie's not offering him the main part, so he'll just take whatever unlikely, good-natured villain he's meant to be.
That's right, and you make good with what you've got.
Absolutely,
you don't try and pretend to be anything that you're not. And I think that was the beauty with a lot of the players that were on with Laurel and Hardy, is they all had certain parts that they played. I mean, what was the guy's name? Charlie Hall was
Hall for Birmingham.
Yeah, and he was always the little maybe Weasley one, or just the one that would always be picking at Ollie mainly, wasn't it? And I love some of their interactions. We'll come a lot across one of those, I'm sure. But
we will, because Charlie Hall, he's the landlord in Laughing Gravy.
That's right. Yeah.
There are two films, Them Nar Hills and Tit for Tat, in which he's also the postman in the music box when he's the one who tells them that they could have just driven up to it. But what's brilliant about it, because Stan liked having English people on the films. A lot of the techies were English because Stan had either known them or he just liked having English accents around him.
Right.
But every now and again, Charlie Hall's Brummie accent will come out in the film, particularly in the music box, where you could have just gone up there, basically. It's But he always play. You're absolutely right in the same, because James Finlayson always plays the same, as we'll talk about in there. But Charlie Hall always playing Weasel's the right word for him. He was always, as you say, in particular, pressing on his button, because Stan didn't tend to notice when people would wind him up. Every now and again, he would cotton on that Ollie was, and he would lose his temper. But for the most part, it was Ollie who took umbrage.
Yes,
his decency being undermined by these people,
Yeah,
and if he thought they were being impolite, or especially if he thought somebody was being unchivalrous to a woman, then Ollie would get furious.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay, then your number 9, then, please, Kevin.
Well, number 9, and much as I said, and I will come back to this theme that words are very important. Obviously, slapstick. Number 9 is dirty work, and it's the scene. It's recreated in that Laurel and Hardy museum you mentioned at Ulverston. There's a tableau of this, and it's Oliver sitting in the chimney, basically. So in this film, Stan and Ollie are chimney sweeps. And again, you don't ask why. You just the caption at the start will tell you that this is their new business, and you see them. Somebody in a posh house for some bizarre reason decides they're going to get Stan and Ollie to, and of course they've already ruined 2 rooms downstairs. So, but this ends with Ollie Ollie's on the roof. He's already had his shirt sleeves ripped off, his hat squashed. Their hat budget must have been incredible.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So, but Stanley's sending this long chimney brush up the chimney. And it's getting stuck, and Ollie's trying to pull the brush up, and Stanley's trying to pull it down, and Ollie's trying to pull it up, and it ends up with Ollie being pulled down the chimney into the fireplace. Huge clouds of dust everywhere, and Ollie just sits there for a moment, quite calmly looking at the camera, and nothing happens until Ollie takes his hat off, and then as soon as Ollie takes his hat off, the first brick hits him on the head with this amazing sound effect. I'm not sure what a brick hitting somebody's head would sound like. And please God, I'll never find out. But I don't think it sounds like 2 coconuts being bashed together. No. It hits him on the head, and Ollie just accepts it. He just looks and he just goes, of course that happened. And he makes no attempt to get out of the fireplace. And then another one hits him on the head. And then a third one hits him on the head. and you think it's over, and Ollie, the look on Ollie's face indicates that it's clearly over, but just to make sure he looks up to make sure, and it hits him in the face, and then he just looks at the camera again with that long-suffering look,
Yeah.
and then and then he goes to pick a brick out of the fireplace to throw it at Stan, whereupon the rest of the bricks fall on his head, which he just takes, and it come my number one clip is Ollie reacting to something, but it's just I think in every Laurel and Hardy film, and Stan Laurel's a genius. There's no two ways about it. But I think Ollie, as you said, the look to camera, the slow burn, in every Laurel and Hardy film, that's the moment you're kind of waiting for.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ed and I know the film's backwards, but you still, that's the bit you go, it's coming, and it's just never not funny. Ollie's reaction, when we'll come on to that, when he accidentally holds a tin of milk to his ear instead of the phone, and it's just like it's just the philosophical resignation, because he starts a lot of it by losing his temper or going in first rather than letting Stan go. And even when there's one film, I can't think of the name off the top of my head, Helpmates, where it starts with Ollie telling himself off in the mirror.
That's right.
Because they'd had a wild party, and then he phones Stan up to help him. And of course, getting Stan to help him is the worst thing you can possibly do, because it ends with Ollie's wife coming home unexpectedly, phones in from the station. But by this time, the house is in a terrible state. The only clothes that Ollie has left is an admiral's uniform from a fancy dress party.
That's right.
So he says to Stan, I'm going to collect my wife. Can you clean up the rest of the house? And then miraculously, lo and behold, in the time that he's
perfect,
you'd think, but Ollie comes back from picking his wife up. He's got a black eye, and his admiral's sword has been bent into a knot because she's taken exception to him turning up like that. And Ollie opens the door, and the outside of the house is perfect. He opens the door, and there's no roof, and Stan is hosing down the burning remnants of the house, and Ollie just says to Stan, "Would you just leave me? I'd like to be on my own." And just in an act of great philosophical resignation, just sits down in the chair and sighs deeply to take stock. Doesn't lose his temper. Doesn't hit somebody. Just sits there, takes his admiral's hat off, and it starts to rain. And it's just. But it's all. I don't think anybody else could do it as well as Ollie does it. And like you say, it's a brilliant thing to do, especially when you're even now. Like you say, I will do the same thing as you. I'll do the double take, or I'll do the. It's like if Ali asked me to do something, if she's something simple like putting the bins out, and I will say something like, "Well, you've got shoes on,"
and
Ali will say, "Oh, can't just put the bin out." And you go, it's just
I still get the moment when I might say something stupid, and my dad will say to me, "You sap." And I'll say, don't you call me a sap. Why for 2 pins I'd knock your block off. You just automatically go into it. But
that's brilliant, yeah.
But yeah, that's a good one. And again, it's one of those things of comedy is like how long is too long for a punchline or for another brick to fall. Because I always find those uncomfortable silences where you're anticipating, is it going to happen again?
Yeah,
no, it's not. Oh, God, it has again. Those are the funniest bits.
Yeah.
Because it just goes on for that little bit too long. Because normally it's the rule of 3, isn't it, with comedy?
It is, yeah.
1, 2, 3, but then there's a little bit of a gap and you think, okay, that bit's like, oh no, he's looking up. And it's just that unpredictability of there's going to be another brick. And you know there's going to be another brick. And then even when it falls, it's still funny.
That's how clever it is, because you do think it's going to be too long, but it never is.
No.
It's always long enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes in your memory, it's like going back to that scene, because I thought, well, I'll count the bricks, because in my head, not having seen it for a year or so, I thought it was going to be about 12.
Right.
But the fact is, it's only 4. There's 3. So it's 3 with quite a long gap in between the 3, and then there's the 4th one when he looks up. You think, oh, that's brilliant. That is just right, but it's still any more, and you probably would have gone, all right, we know that's fine now. But it's just perfectly done,
Yeah.
and it's just
and they would have only had like 18, 20 minutes of that short anyway.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you've
yeah,
probably got
yeah.
over 10% of the running time just
Yeah,
on that
so
one
on
gag.
that one gag, absolutely, yeah. Well, there's a lot of. I mean, there's no denying not every Lauren Hardy film is genius, and sometimes they are. Some of the films are worked around one gag, basically.
Yes.
Sometimes the plot just is just there for one set piece,
Yeah.
but you don't mind when it's as good as that. That's fine.
Completely agree. And to be fair, my number 9 is kind of that. I mean, I can't really remember much more in Pardon Us, apart from Stan with the dodgy tooth. So every time he says something, he has to say that.
It's well, also it's just the place. If it happened anywhere else, if it happened in a the sawmill we were talking about earlier, that would be fine. If it happened in a hospital, that wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah,
but it's
because
the
you're in a
fact that
prison.
they're in prison, and it starts to happen when they're talking to the governor.
Yeah,
and then when they're talking to Walter Long again,
exactly.
the chief convict, and it's just because, of course, Ollie knows what's coming every time Stan says something, and it's like, so Ollie's desperation to stop him talking because, of course, the governor of the prison and the convict thinks that Stan's to the extent that the convict actually eventually takes to Stan because he thinks he's being a cheeky little. He's
That's
not,
right. The other bit I can remember is when they're in the classroom.
Oh,
and
yes,
they
yes.
say, good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning, dear teacher. Good morning to you. And again, that's something that I still sing now if I'm saying good morning to someone.
But it's also just I don't know what sound a loose tooth makes, but it's not that I can't even do it. But it's not even that fart noise. But it's just in their world, it is. It's just basically.
I think it's because I've said it before on this podcast that I find the fart noise is probably one of the most funniest things ever.
I think I mentioned this to you before. My friend who's he lives in Switzerland now, and he's found the right place to live because he's never been laugh a minute. To be perfectly, so he's found the right country to be in. To be perfectly honest, he's in German. He's in the German part of Switzerland.
Apologies to all our Switzerland.
Having said that, we went to the Mardi Gras in Brig once, and that was very much laugh a minute. I have to say, but
there you go.
But he once said to me, I nearly had to have 3 days off. I was so distressed because he and I were going somewhere with another mate, and we were talking about somebody we'd seen in a comedian, and he just went, well, the trouble is, Kevin, you have to accept. He said, you could write the funniest joke in the world, and everybody would accept it's the funniest joke in the world, but it still won't be as funny as somebody farting in a lift.
Yeah.
And you just agree. He's right. I don't know why am I doing this?
You can't beat it. That's the thing.
It's like the time Sean Locke inadvertently said to Richard E. Grant that all actors were just simply meat puppets. The rest of us had to spend the whole evening just apologise because Richard E. Grant was literally phoning people up and going, Judy, have you heard Ian? We're meat puppets. And it's like, and it's, in a way, Sean Locke was right, but it's just, yeah.
And why nobody has had that as a band name? The Meat Puppets.
Would be great. It would be great. But that thing you talking about doing the good morning to you brings me on to my number 8.
Okay.
Because it's one of those, and it's Laughing Gravy from 1931.
Right.
Which is where Stan and Ollie are in the boarding house, and they've got a dog. They share in a bed, and they've got a dog called Laughing Gravy, which appeared in quite a few films. No one ever explains why a dog's called Laughing Gravy. The dog's called Laughing Gravy. And the landlord, played by Charlie Hall, has a strict no dogs rule. And there's a blizzard coming on, and the landlord keeps thinking he can hear a dog barking, so they have to pretend that Ollie's got a sore throat, and most of the film has either Stan, Ollie, or the dog at one stage are outside on the roof in the blizzard, while the others are inside, and it ends up with Laughing Gravy getting covered in snow and soot, and then having a bath, and then it ends up. Then this is a scene at the end where Charlie Hall, the landlord, is throwing them out. And as he opens the door to throw them out, a policeman's putting a notice on the door, as you do, going quarantine.
Yeah.
Do not leave for 2 months. And the last shot is the landlord killing himself. But it's a very funny film. It's a very funny film, but it's also the one that Ed and I love together the most. And it's the one where and people don't understand what I'm saying because every time something happens to the dog, they have to hide the dog in a cupboard or up the chimney. Stan goes, "Poor little laughing gravy," and that's what Ed and I say whenever. It's like we're watching one of the games last night, and there's the keeper mucks up, and we just go, "Poor little laughing gravy." It's anything, or there's somebody on the news, you see somebody drop something out there, and it's just, and it never fails to not make Ali just doesn't laugh, it just doesn't understand it. But both of us, we never. It doesn't matter how many times you find an excuse to say it. It just and it's a bonding thing.
It's great though, isn't it? Isn't it great to have something?
It's really good. Is it even where we went to a Chinese restaurant takeaway the other day, Ed and I, and we were and the guy who he said, "I'm sorry, we haven't got no prawn crackers." And Ed and I just looked at each other and went, "No prawn crackers." Poor little laughing gravy. It's just he didn't have a clue what we were saying, but it just makes us both laugh every time, and it's. And and the fact that it's like me and my son, and because Dad would join in when he didn't quite know what was going on, but he would join in. But it's just there aren't many films that can give you that, or many comedians or double acts that can give it. There might be times where you'll use well, that's the other one. Is Ed's other one is where you do something to help me, which is like all these.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And as we covered it, Ed loves saying, "Not you." He doesn't want me. He wants the other monkey.
That's it.
You.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the beautiful thing of it. I think it's multi-generational, isn't it? And as long as people like us can pass it on to the next generation, then that next generation will then pass it on, and in the end, they'll never die.
Well, do you know what? I think that's a really good point, Pam. And I think Dad's Army has that.
I agree
as well. Agree. But I don't think there are many other things. I don't think. And I love Charlie Chaplin. I'll rephrase it. I admire Charlie Chaplin. I understand how brilliant Charlie Chaplin was. I had a strange relationship with Stan, but I understand how brilliant. But I can't imagine many people saying, "Oh, I love Charlie Chaplin." It's like again. Something like Porridge. I think Porridge is a brilliant sitcom, but you wouldn't necessarily sit down with your kid and say, "Oh, you got to watch Porridge." Whereas Dad's Army, and I don't think they would have sat down to write that either. It just has that magic combination, and Stan and Ollie have that magic thing where even today, like when kids, one of my younger cousins or Ed's younger cousins, even today when kids have got so many other distractions, if you like, you can still sit down with him and watch Laurel and Hardy. And they first of all they laugh at the violent bits, and then you see them getting a bit older and laughing at the jokes, and it's great. It's multi-generational, multi-male generational possibly, but still.
I think the only sort of setback on it is like kids and black and white, isn't it? Black and white becomes a fuddy-duddy. Oh, that's ancient.
That's a good point. Yeah,
you get them over that, and hopefully,
yeah, that's a really interesting point, Pav, as well, because I can't bring myself to watch colorized versions of the
I'm the same.
Laurel and Hardy films. For me,
I think it's a bit of a purist thing. I think
I don't know what it is. It's just for me, it somehow doesn't seem. It's like I like an old print. I like it. You can hear the hisses and crackles on the soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
But somehow the colorized thing it distracts me a little bit. I want to see how people in the cinema saw it, which is why it was so interesting watching that. Way Out West with it in a cinema full of comedians and actors. It was just brilliant because you laugh at it in a different way when you're all laughing at it together, and also you see how well edited it is and how well timed it is because the dialogue doesn't move on until the whole cinema has stopped laughing. Because sometimes when you watch it on telly, you'd go, actually, I would have moved on a bit quicker. But
right,
it's time for a cinema. It's time for a cinema audience because they would have done that in previews. They would have literally had a stopwatch and said, right, this is a huge joke. We can ride this joke for as long as we possibly can. So whereas we would have carried on, they timed it for that. It's so clever.
Yeah, very very clever. But Laughing Gravy was in my top 15. I love Laughing Gravy, but it just didn't quite make my top 10. My number 8. I'm going to go for one of those kind of moments that just make you laugh. It's not a massive thing. It's from one of their most popular. So I think it won an Oscar. Was the Music Box?
It's the only Oscar
only
they ever
one
won.
but it's
1932.
yeah. It's when Ollie is struggling, pushing this piano up, and Stan is just going for a ride. He's just he's stood on, and it's the look on his face. He has this very sort of placid, like almost like he's asleep look on his face, while Ollie is struggling to push this piano, and Stan's just stepped up onto the piano and just haven't taken a ride. It's one of those little moments. There is a moment in oh god, is it Toad in the Hole? Was one the boat one?
Yeah, Toad in the Hole, which is my next one.
Toad in the Hole. When Stan has done something wrong, and he's just walking past the porthole, and he just he's looking at Ollie, and Ollie's looking for him, and he's just like he just pokes his head at the top and goes back down. Those little moments.
Yeah.
Live Ghost as well, when the captain says to them, "Get forward." And he says, "Forehead? What's on my forehead?" And they both sort of like they look at each other's foreheads, and they're just talking to themselves. They're not talking to the camera. It's so funny. But that moment for me is one of those moments. And I've only got that from the Music Box.
The Music Box is one of those where, I mean, it's such a simple concept. They've got to get a music box. They've got to deliver a piano.
Yeah.
In a wooden box to a house, which happens to be up a lot of flights of steps, which has become a pilgrimage. The steps are still there in Hollywood. The Music Box steps. But it's just the amount of ways they can find to prevent that piano being delivered is incredible. And there's one bit as well where there's they're going up the stairs, and there's a nursemaid coming down pushing a pram.
That's right.
And she says, and any other nursemaid would have just sort of manoeuvred around, but she says, "Pardon me, would you mind moving them?" And Ollie, being very polite, takes his hat off to say, "Of course." And as he takes his hat off, he takes his hand off the piano, and the piano hurtles all the way back down the bottom of the stairs again, which she finds hilarious.
Yeah.
So she's laughing at them when it's at the bottom of the stairs. So she turns around and Stan kicks her up the arse.
That's right.
Which again, to us seems a bit harsh, but to audiences it's very funny. So she turns around and punches Stan, and then for good measure punches Ollie as well. And then the next thing you know, she's telling a policeman, but you don't see the first part of the dialogue. All you hear is the policeman saying, "He kicked you," and she says, "Yeah, right in the middle of my daily duties," which is there are very few David Orton and Lauren Hardy. That was a clear one, but again, it's I mean, that's it won the best short feature movie. As the only Oscar they ever won that she deserved. So.
But there were times when they used to have those like little bit of punch ups between three people. Sometimes it would be a woman, and sometimes the woman would get a smack in the chops, and then they'd smack Stan and they'd smack Ollie, and there wasn't any. They didn't worry about that, did they?
No. Well, I mean, this is not the place to discuss levels of domestic violence in mid-1930s America, but
no.
But interestingly,
this is the only place to discuss that.
Well, yeah, but the women always win though. They Stan and Ollie very rarely win any fights.
Yeah,
but if women always get the better of them physically. Which is, if you're going to have that sort of thing. But again, I hate using that phrase. But if you look at the history of music hall, then quite a few musical sketches involve women attacking drunken men, in particular, and that happens a lot. There's quite a few. We'll come to one where if Mrs. Stan or Mrs. Ollie is upset, there's one case where she just gets on a chair. Takes Ollie's hat off and hits him on the head with a bottle. It's just
that's right,
and no one turns a hair. These are things that are not unusual. So,
well, it's like you said earlier on. It's like the women were always the ones with power.
Yeah,
they were the bosses, or they might have been henpecking Stan or Ollie, but they were always the ones that would win. It didn't matter what happened, even if you thought Stan and one that I've got coming up. You think that Stan and Ollie have won basically, but the wife wins in the end. They always did. So they were always the powerful ones.
There's another thing about violence. It's a film called One Good Turn where they're on the road. They're forced to knock on people's houses begging for food, and they knock on this old lady's house, who's very kind to them, brings them in,
That's right. I remember that.
and they overhear what they think is the landlord threatening to throw her out.
Yeah.
But it turns out they're rehearsing a local amateur dramatic thing. The landlord's James Finlayson, and he's
that's
doing
it.
that. You'll never darken this door again. So they try and raise money for her to pay the rent. But part of it involves chopping wood, and Stan keeps getting hit on a so Ollie hits chops along, the log goes up in the air, hits Stan on the head. When Stan's first daughter first met Ollie, she wouldn't go near him because he was the man who hurt Daddy.
Oh, right.
In the film. So what they did, they changed the ending of that film so that Stan gets hit by a log once too often, and then he takes the axe off Ollie, threatens him with the axe, and starts hitting wood like machine gun rate. So it hits Ollie on the head. And once the daughter saw that, she was perfectly happy then because Daddy got his own back.
Right.
But for the most part, like you say, the women do tend to win out in those situations.
Okay, then, Kevin, you're number 7, please.
Well, do you know? I think I'm going to lose that challenge, aren't I? Because we haven't had any.
We haven't had any yet.
Yeah. My number 7 is one we've just been talking about. Actually, Toad in a Hole.
Okay.
And when I first sat down to think about this last week, I thought, well, Toad in the Hole, that's going to be top 3 easily. And then, to my surprise, I found other things higher than it. And I think for a lot of people, Laurel and Hardy fans, this is would be their favourite. It's just joyful. It starts off. It's such a brilliant, optimistic way because they're in this film. They are fishmongers, and they've got their own little van.
Fresh
fish, fresh from the ocean this morning.
I love that.
We got tuna, mackerel. But it's great. It's a great thing. So, and then Ollie's got his Stan. So Ollie does the singing sort of thing, and Stan blows his horn.
Yeah.
And there's music playing, and it's a sunny day, and Ollie just starts laughing and going, we've cracked it. We're doing really well." And Stan says, makes this little speech and just goes, "Well, if we were to cut out the middleman and catch our own fish, then everything we sold would be profit." And Ollie stops the car and says, "Tell me that again." And of course, Stan can't do it.
I love those moments.
Stan always has his bright ideas and then completely forget. Well, if the fish were to, Ollie takes him as well. So they buy a boat off this shyster played by a chap called Billy Gilbert. And he says there might be 1 or 2 leaks, but all we have to do is fill the boat with water, and then you find. So they fill the boat with water. Of course, it's just everything. But so the rest of the film is them. It's just them mending the boat essentially, but they are at their most childlike. But there is that brilliant scene where Ollie gets so exasperated with Stan that he basically imprisons him below deck.
Yeah.
And what happens is that Stan somehow manages to get his head stuck between the mast and the wall. So he's stuck. But
so good.
And he knows, he tries to get Ollie's attention, but Ollie's sulking with him so much he takes no notice. So first of all, Stan tries to pass the time by playing noughts and crosses against himself, but he doesn't look. So he does his go, but then when he's playing it, he turns away, so he doesn't see where he makes the move.
Yeah.
And then he realizes there's only one way out of it, this dilemma, and he sees a saw. There's always something lying about that's handy for, and he saws his way, and it's because he saws on neck level.
That's right.
Which is funny anyway, because he's just doing, and then it cuts to Ollie, who of course is now at the top of the mast, and all Ollie can hear is his soaring sound effect from somewhere, and he just it's like 30 seconds of Ollie looking round, trying to ascertain where this soaring's coming from, and of course it's the mast that he's on that's being soared. It's just there's not a wasted moment in that film. No. It's just, and it's apart from the guy who sells in the boat, it's just the two of them. And it is just essence of Laurel and Hardy. It's just distilled Laurel and Hardy. The slapstick is perfect. The dialogue is perfect. It just sums up these two guys who are. I remember reading an essay about it. Said that these two guys clearly there's something about them, right? They've set up a business, right? So they know what they're doing. Somewhere they've got a car. They're clearly they're selling fish and doing well. And then, but within 5 minutes, they just revert to being 5-year-old kids
Yeah.
doing things just to annoy each other.
And they're businessmen in the real world,
But
aren't they?
they're meant to be businessmen.
Yeah.
And clearly they've done something right.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's just one of those films. Even though it's only at number 7, it would be, if you said to me, you can only watch 3 Laurel and Hardy films again, it probably would be in that 3.
Well, I will tell you, we've got one because this is my number 2. This is my number 2.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
I find the whole thing, because he in chalk as well, he draws a picture of Ollie's face, and when he wins, I think when he wins the noughts and crosses, he pokes the picture in the eye. That's all right. I'm getting you, Stan, Ollie.
And he does, because he does it with certain look at.
Yeah.
That's
and he's doing
funny.
the thing where he leans his hat against the back wall and blows his finger, and it looks like his hat is popping up. There's all these different things that he does, but it is so funny. It's one of my favourite. Toad in the Hole is one of my favourite Stan and Ollie shorts. But yeah, so that's your number 7. That's my number 2.
Yeah,
so we've got that
great,
one.
okay.
So my number 7, I'm going for the whole soda moment in Men of War. Now, again,
which I noticed a lot of people on social media went for this one as well.
Yeah. If we're having a family meal, especially with our mum and dad, and people say, "What do you want to drink?" I will go soda. And then when it gets to my dad, I go, "And what will you have, Stanley?" It's just one of those things. Like, I'll have a soda. It's just a great thing, because Stan and Ollie are both sailors, and they're taking these young ladies who they've met at the park, and they've only got enough money, whatever it is, 15 cents or whatever it is, so they can only have one soda, and then get the girls a soda, and it's just that classic. I mean, it's the kind of joke that you've seen a million times in other things, where they say, "Look, we'll have half each, we'll share it." And then Stan goes and drinks the whole thing, and Ollie says, "It's that thing. Why did you do that?" And Stan, "Well, my half was the bottom half." And it always makes me think, like, was that the genesis of that joke? Because I've seen it a million times on loads of other things. Yeah. Is that where that joke was born? Or is that kind of thing that maybe would have been a music hall joke? I don't know.
I imagine it would be a musical joke, because again, so much musical comedy is about poverty and hardship, and so I would think that probably was a musical joke. It doesn't matter, because it's like, in terms of films, they were probably the first to do it. What I love about that soda, because Stan just doesn't get the concept. No. He doesn't get
again. It's that rule of thing. I think they do it 3 times.
Well, I think more than that, because Ollie has to keep repeating to him, because the guy on the soda wagon has clearly clocked what's going on, so he's expecting. Then it's soda.
I think, isn't that James Finlayson that's behind that?
That's James Finlayson as well. When he gives him
the eye, he does the old eye thing.
And it's the fact that Ollie says, "And what will you have, Stanley?" to give him the cue. I'll have soda. And it's. And there's another film as well where they go and get ice cream, and they haven't got the flavour ice cream, but it's standard. But anyway, what I love about that says so much about their relationship, Stan and Ollie, because Ollie is trying to, it's not a word David used, but Ollie's trying to get off with these two young girls.
Yes, that's right.
And Stan can't understand why they would be having soda when he's with his best mate, and if they've only got enough money for 2 sodas, then they should have a soda each. Because obviously in Stan's world, even though Stan's married quite often, and even though they in Stan's world, he'd rather be with his. It's like, that's where he's a 5-year-old kid. He's like, no, I want a soda. Why are we getting these people soda? Because it wouldn't occur to him that soda might lead on to something else, that might lead on to, who knows, a kiss maybe. So but it's the innocence of it, and again. Sometimes we've discussed this before, people mistake innocence for softness in a way, but it's just the 2 characters. One, Ollie, who thinks he is worldly wise and a man of the world. He's not. He clearly isn't.
No.
But he's acting that part, and because it's always Ollie who falls in love with inappropriate people and thinks that they love him and has to join the Foreign Legion because of it. And Stan just can't understand why he's behaving like this. Well, Stan wants to be playing football or something, or if they had Panini cards in those days. He'd want to be swapping Panini cards.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, that's right.
not impressing two
Yeah,
girls.
it's weird.
But
'Cause-
even then, again, you go, how did they get in the Navy?
well, exactly, exactly.
What bizarre recruitment standards do they have that Stan and Ollie, who are clearly older men even then,
Yeah,
they look younger, but how did they get in the Navy? You just go along with it. It's
of course you
fine.
do. It's,
Why would you question it?
It's their world. Because the other thing I was, again, through watching all of these, I was trying to think who is a modern day, like you'd class them as the same kind of thing. And I thought of like Father Ted. And like Father Ted and Dougal Maguire, where you've got Father Ted who thinks he's very, very clever, but he's not. He's an idiot. And the amount of times that he explains things to Dougal, and then Dougal still has no idea. I thought that's kind of like Stan and Ollie, their relationship.
Do you know what, Pav? I've never thought of that before, but that's a really good comparison. It's exactly the same way because again, because he would,
That whole thing about these cows are small, but those are far away. I thought that is straight out of Laurel and Hardy.
Well, absolutely, because also Father Dougal would be bemused as to why two girls were getting soda and he wasn't. That would be
exactly.
That's a great comparison. That's really good.
Okay, so that was my number 7. So your number 6 then, please, Kevin.
My number 6 is their last short film. We have mentioned it, Thicker Than Water, and again, I think this is my favourite dialogue ever in any film ever. And again, it's one of those that Ed and I will do for each other. When Ollie is married to an actor called Daphne Pollard, who's tiny. She played his wife in quite a few films. As Mae Bush was the woman we most associate with.
The main one, yeah.
But Daphne Pollard played his wife. And it works very well because she's so small compared to Ollie. It's like watching BT Sport now when Peter Crouch is the pundit with that tiny woman who hosts it, which is like they need to sort that out. But there's this thing. So Stan is living. It starts with she's got the hump because Stan's living with them, right? And Stan's a tenant. They've agreed that he can stay. But there's a knock on the door, and it's James Finlayson again. And James Finlayson wants his $35
right
for the hire purchase payment for the furniture, and Daphne Pollard, his wife, says, "Well, you've had it. I gave Oliver $35 to give to you," and Oliver says, "Well, no, I gave it to Stan to give to you," and so then Daphne, the wife, says to Stan, "What did you do with the $35?" And he said, "I gave it to him," pointing at Ollie, to pay my rent. And then it goes. That's where he says, because he says, "I gave it to you to pay my room and board." And you gave it to her, remember? So Ollie's given her the money. So the money that she's given to Ollie to pay the HP
sounds just like the episode.
But then it's brilliant. I had to write it down to do justice because she says, "Do you mean to say that the money that he gave to you, that you gave to him, that he gave to me, was the same money that I gave to him to pay him?" And Stan says, "Well, if that was the money you gave to me to give to him to pay to them," and
it just goes
and
on.
It goes on like that. And then eventually Stan says, "Well," he says to Ollie, "Well, there's no point you and me if you gave her the money. There's no point you and me falling out about it." It's a silly thing. But again, it's one of those things that Ed and I was. So Ali will say, "Did you get the cat food?" And I said, "What? Was that the cat food that you wanted me to give to him, to give to the cat, give to which Ed will think is hilarious. Now he'll just go, "Did you get the fucking cat food?" Yeah. Have you got that fight? It's like, if every now and again a child will lend a tenner off his. So so have I got? Ed, you got that tenner? And you go, "Was that the tenner you gave to me to give to her to give?"
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful the way she does it because she points at each person in turn when she says, "Do you mean to say?" It's the fact that, "Do you mean to say?"
Yeah.
That the money that he gave to you to give to him, and it's just brilliant.
It's strange because, like, from my point of view, whenever I say that, like in everyday thing, I do the James Finlayson bit. So I'll go, "I gave it to you, gave it to me." I do that bit.
Yeah.
That is a great one. That is such a good one. every single one of these. I mean, we could have 10 the same, and we could have none the same. Well, we've got one, I know, but there are so many great bits. My number 6, I'm going for the classic. I'm going to do the Trail of the Lonesome Pine. From Way Out West.
Yeah.
It was weird because I think it got back in the charts, I think in the 90s, didn't it?
It was in the chat. It was the first single I ever bought with my own pocket money. I think
Was
it was
it?
1974.
Right.
It got into the charts. And then somebody remixed it with added effects later on in the 90s. But in 1974, it was just a straightforward. It was them.
Yeah.
It's a clip of them from the film.
From the film. But it kind of like when it became I'm sure it got back into the charts sometime, whether it was the 80s or 90s, and I kind of at that point I thought, this is great because more people are going to discover Laurel and Hardy now. It wasn't just going to be old people that know who they are. They're going to look at these two funny guys, and again, just as a routine, it's just hilarious. There is the different ways that Stan is singing. The bonk on the head is just hilarious because it's like a rubber mallet that bounces off his head. It's just a classic piece of comedy.
Well, there's already been a brilliant build-up to it as well because they're in the bar and they're being bothered by dogs because it turns out that
That's right.
Stan's shoe has got a hole in it, and the meat they've been given to eat in the bar is so tough they can't eat it. So Stan uses it to put inside his shoe. So for some reason there's all these dogs around them, and then they hear the music, and so Stan just starts singing on the train in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And Ollie's just completely baffled by this. And it's his reaction. And the only way to... I don't know why he wants to stop Stan singing, because it's quite lovely. It's not Stan's voice.
Yeah.
And it's to... And he asks the barman for a mallet. He says, excuse me, sir, do you have... So the barman gives him a mallet, of course. Yeah. And then, like you say, he tests it by hitting it on the bar with this really strange sound of it, and then just hits Ollie on the head.
Yeah.
And there's a pause, and Ollie starts singing. He's been singing baritone, and he starts singing in soprano.
Yeah.
Which is it's a brilliant joke. And then he stops singing, and then there's another pause. He just collapses.
Yeah.
And everyone goes about their own business.
And then they just carry on.
But they just carry on. But it's because again, you really want to hear Ollie singing because Ollie's such a brilliant singer.
Yeah.
But it's just such a brilliant moment in the middle of this film, Way Out West, which we'll mention as my number 3.
Right.
Say, but it's there's a lot of music in that film as well. But all the music is every now and again in a film. There's a song you're going to go, oh, for God's sake! You know,
yeah.
It's like not in a Disney film as we discussed in the first time because they're all part of it. But in the Laurel and Hardy films, you go, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You know, and like we said, it's all part of it, and it's the audiences clearly didn't mind, but it's just the way Ollie looks. It's just that sound effect. It's just the doop doop because he's testing the mallet. He wants to make sure the mallet will actually.
And that mallet has got heft to it.
It's got heft. It looks like, because it also makes exactly the same noise when he hits Stan on the head with it.
Yeah, and like I say, it bounces off his head. It's obviously a rubber mallet, but oh my Lord.
Yeah,
so good. Okay, right, we're halfway, so it's time for this.
Pop quiz, hot shot.
Gonna have a bit of a quiz. I think you might find this one a bit easy, but you'll definitely get number 1. So I've got 10 different ways that Laurel and Hardy are known across the world.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to give you their names. You got to tell me what country they're from.
Right.
Okay, so apologies, all these other countries, if I'm not saying it in the right way, but I'm going to say it sort of as I see it phonetically. So, number 1, Dick and Doof.
That's France.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's Germany. It's Germany. It's Germany. We've already mentioned it.
I'm going to give you that one. You got yourself out of that one.
Yes,
that
Germany.
Was very, very close there, Kevin.
Yes, sorry. That's overconfidence.
That was. Number 2, Flip-E-Flap.
Oh, I don't know. Is that? Oh, I don't know. That's a good one. It sounds Scandinavian. I'm going to go Sweden.
It's not. It's Poland.
Is it? Wow.
It is.
I'm going to be bad at this.
Okay. Helan og Helvan.
No, that's definitely Scandinavian, isn't it? So I'm going Swedish. Oh, no.
It's Norway. So you're in the right ballpark.
No.
You're in the right ballpark.
Okay.
Stan C. Bran.
Sweden.
Is Romania.
This is a disaster.
Romania. Dik en de Dun
The Netherlands.
is correct. Well done. El Gordo y el Flaco.
Well, that's got to be Spain, isn't it?
Well done. He's on a roll now. Hashemen v Haraze.
Oh, Turkey? Oh.
Israel.
Okay.
Stani Og Ollie.
Sweden.
Iceland. Pax Ja Pinik.
Finland.
Estonia.
Yeah, I'm blaming your pronunciation.
Absolutely.
It's
Completely blame my pronunciation. And the final one, O Gordo y O Magro.
Portugal.
I mean, you sort of Brazil. You could kind of.
They speak Portuguese.
They speak Portuguese. So Portuguese, Brazil. I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you a point, half a point for that one.
That was a disaster.
You're on 3.5 there. So
Okay.
that's not too bad.
See, I was overconfident. I knew Dick and Dance. Well, I nearly didn't know Dick.
You
and
nearly
Dance,
didn't.
know Dick and Dance.
Because you told me that one.
I know.
Right then, Kev. Back to the job in hand, and your number 5, please.
Yeah, before I do my number 5, I should point out it's a good job you did that timey-wimey thing, because people will be going, hang on a second, he seems to have developed hay fever in between number 6 and number 5. Or he's so grumpy about the quiz not going well, he's got hay fever off the back of it.
You know, I mean, I had a complete spring clean as well while you were raging about your performance in the quiz. So, you know, it's the power of the internet.
Your background's like the TARDIS. You've had a change of TARDIS.
I completely have.
Well, I have to say the quizzes on the first 2 were literally like, what does the walk stand for in Walt Disney's first name, basically. And now suddenly you're getting really complicated, Laurel. Anyway, number 5, and I think this might surprise a lot of people because I've already mentioned it in glowing terms. Number 5 is, I think a lot of people would have thought this would be my number 1. And I think for a lot of people it will be their number 1. And it was for Stan Laurel because it was his favourite Laurel and Hardy film. And it's the Music Box.
Right.
Which is the only one they ever won an Oscar for best live action short, which basically shows them at their most idiotic and at their most clever in a way. Essentially, the whole idea is they have to get a piano from the bottom of a set of very high stairs to the top of a very high stairs, and it's totally beyond them because the piano has a mind of its own. They keep getting interrupted by various people, like the nurse who got kicked in the middle of her daily duties. And then when they do eventually get the piano up to the top, to the house at the top, Charlie Hall, who we've also mentioned, who is a favourite in their films, in his best Birmingham accent. He's a postman in Hollywood, but somehow he's got a Birmingham accent. Tells them that there's a road that they could have taken all the way up to the top. And so, of course, what they do is take it down again to take it all the way up to the top.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's hard to describe it's such a simple concept, but it's hard to describe how beautiful it is. And there's one particular detail in it, and some people think this is a mistake, but it shows how clever Stan Laurel was. There's one particular detail when they get it back up to the top for the second time, there's an awning and they attach it to that. And for some reason, even though this piano was too heavy for 2 men to manoeuvre upstairs, this awning made of canvas takes the weight of the piano quite happily, basically. But but it ends up with Stan falling into a pond, and then the splash, quite clearly 2 buckets of water have been thrown at him from different sides.
Yeah.
And there are people who watch it now and go, "Oh, it's so primitive." But it was deliberate. It was a deliberate joke. It was a Stan joke. He put that joke in. He insisted on it. So it's a joke he'd always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious because at the time everybody would have gone, "The water's come from the side and not." And it's just, and it also as well. It just again indicates the level of basic violence that there must have been in the world in those days. When the maid is punching him in the face, the policeman's hitting him on the head with a baton, the professor who they're delivering the piano to is happily hitting them with a cane. They're kicking each other at us, and this level of violence goes unnoticed. In fact, it's almost as though they deserve it. But it's a beautiful film, and it's one of those. It's the one, even though it's not my number one, it's the one I most often turn to if I think I want to watch a bit of Lauren Hardy. That'll be the one.
Is it really? That's
Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. It's as we said before. That I mean, I'm assuming it's of the time in the fact that a woman would punch them, they would punch the woman, and it was like it wasn't thought of. Oh my God, they've just punched a woman. It was just the slapstick of it all, wasn't it?
Well, also as well because you know that the woman's going to get her will eventually win, as she does.
Yes.
Because it turns out that all women in Lauren Hardy films can punch harder than they can.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah, which is not to say, I mean, and oddly, that would imply that there's a level of slapstick you get in Lauren Hardy films that you would get in, say, Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, and there isn't.
No.
People associate Lauren Hardy with slapstick, and of course there is some element, but it's much more than that. Certainly in the sound films, it's much more than basic slapstick. But there is an element of slap. There's more slap than stick. Let's put it in some of them. But no, in Charlie Chaplin films, the slapstick is horrible. The slapstick is, I'm sure all it is for because Charlie Chaplin was very, very anti-authority, which was often represented by the police in Charlie Chaplin films.
Yeah.
So we see scenes where policemen die because Charlie Chaplin manages to bend a lamppost, a gas light, puts it on top of the policeman's head until the policeman is rendered unconscious. And people are properly smacked in the face in Charlie Chaplin films in a way that even in a Laurel and Hardy film, even when Ollie's sitting in a fireplace having bricks fall on his head, that those bricks are not going to kill him because if they were, he would have got out of the fireplace.
That's right. I mean, it is weird that it's from sort of the same time, but I can remember watching Charlie Chaplin, and it's that kind of cupped-handed punch to the face that he used to do.
Yeah,
which still looks brutal. I mean, I'm assuming it wouldn't hurt as much as a proper fist, but it still looks brutal. And I know that they're selling it a lot as well, aren't they? With like the violent shake back of the head. But I think we've said before, is like I can remember seeing George Lucas at the making of The Phantom Menace, and he's watching the Keystone Cops, and all he's doing is going, how did they do that?
Yeah.
How did they film that?
Well, it's interesting because both Charlie and Stan would have learned how to do that in musical.
That's right, yeah.
Which was very violent. A lot of musical was sketches. But what's interesting is, I mean, Charlie Chaplin's films were very popular. If you think he was making those in sort of 1914, 1915, the level of contempt they have for the police in those films is incredible. They hate those films. Really hate the police and hate politicians, and the police get badly beaten up in them.
Yeah.
Whereas by the time the 30s come along, the police are the authority figures. The authority's been re-established. It's like Stan and Ollie do what the police tell them to do.
That's right. Although they are pretty much always they're always in trouble with the police in the majority of movies.
Absolutely, except the films where they are the police. But there's the scene in the music box where the policeman shouts up for them to come down, and Stan goes all the way down to the bottom of the stairs, and then the policeman says, "I don't want you, I want the other monkey." And Stan shouts out, "He doesn't want me, he wants the other monkey." Yeah. And Ollie doesn't know who that is. He goes, "You." So Ollie comes down. In the Charlie Chaplin film, Charlie Chaplin would have come down, killed the policeman, and gone back up
just
again.
Gone back. Yeah.
So that just shows how attitudes had changed to authority in that short space of time.
That's right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Okay. Right, my number 5, I've gone for Saps at Sea. Where Ollie is suffering from anxiety, basically, and anytime he hears horns, he goes off his rocker, and they end up having a nice trip to the seaside. Well, they're on a boat, aren't they? Basically,
yeah.
And it's Walter Long, isn't it? Who's the big heavy again? And he's going to try and kidnap them, or just try. I think does he escape from prison? I think
he's hiding out on the boat.
Hiding out on the boat, and so Stan and Ollie decide that they're going to try and do him up by making a meal for him out of just out of string and soap and sponges, and they make what looks like an amazing meal. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's spaghetti and meatballs and biscuits and all this kind of stuff. But Walter says, "No, you have it first." And it's then just a long scene of Stan and Ollie eating these household implements. I'm assuming it was actually real food that they're eating, but they make it look so painful when they're trying to eat a meatball that is made out of a sponge or coffee that is made out of tobacco and water and stuff.
Yeah.
It is one of those where it's got each piece of minutia of the scene is so disgusting, but they also make it look like it is really nice to eat. It just looks like a great meal.
Yeah, I mean, for me, oddly enough, that's one of my son's favourite films. For me, it's probably the last Laurel and Hardy film I can watch without crying.
Yeah.
Because the ones after that, they're so far short of their powers. But I think Ollie is officially described or diagnosed with hornophobia.
That's right.
Because their job is they work in a factory testing car horns, basically, and eventually they have to go away because every time Ollie hears a car horn, he just goes,
horns.
But Walter Long is also responsible for one of the greatest acts of cartoon violence. There's I think I may have mentioned it. I think it's called Going Bye-Bye, when Stan and Ollie have to travel from the West Coast to the East Coast, and they decide that they should get some travelling partners to share the cost, and they end up travelling with the great Mae Bush, who turns out that her boyfriend has just been put in prison because Stan and Ollie testified against him, and Stan and Ollie. As you know, Walter Long says, you guys, because they find Walter Long guilty and sentence him to 20 years in prison, and Stan says, "Aren't you going to hang him?" and Walter Long is so infuriated. He says, "I'm going to break out of prison. I'm going to wrap your legs around your neck."
That's right.
And the final scene is it ends up with him breaking their legs off and wrapping them around their neck, which is we'll come on to some gruesome violence later on, but Walter Long was, by all accounts, a really nice chap.
I bet he was. But he had one of those faces, didn't he? He just had one of those faces.
But Ollie got on particularly well with him, because in Ollie's first silent films, of course, Ollie always played the heavy. He always played the Walter Long role. So he sympathised with Walter. But he was a great villain. He was a really good villain. Yeah. But yeah, that is a good film, Horns. It's a great scene.
I think I agree. It's one of the last really, really good ones when they were on the top of their form, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my number 5. Okay, so your number 4 then, please, Kevin.
Well, number 4 is the one that has the other scene of terrible, tasteless violence. Well, no, it's not terrible, tasteless violence, but it's terribly tasteless. Just excuse me while I deal with this hay fever.
Yeah, if you hear this weird noise, that is Kevin
horns.
Blowing his horns.
That'll be Ollie. Blockheads was their last decent full-length film. It's 1938. They're already starting to show their age a little bit. It was the last film they made with Hal Roach and MGM. And because of contract issues, Stan and Ollie hadn't worked together for about 18 months, 2 years. So it was a bit of a reunion for them. And it takes as its premise the fact, and it's for me, it's the best sequence of double takes you'll ever see in any film, basically. It takes as its premise, it starts off in World War One. Stan and Ollie about to go over the top, and the officer says to Stan, "No, you stay here, you're guarding the trench. Don't you go anywhere until you're told to be relieved." So Ollie goes over the tent, and it cuts to 1938, and Stan's still in the trench, and he's still firing his machine gun at any plane that Ollie's over. And then, of course, he's discovered, and he becomes this hero. He's taken back to America. And there's this wonderful scene with Ollie's at home with his wife, and he asks if he can borrow 10 cents just to buy something. There's this whole scene where she says, "What do you want 10 cents for?" He says, "I wish you wouldn't ask me."
Yeah.
Yes, because it's for a present. So he walks down the corridor, and his next door neighbour's reading the paper, and Ollie says, "Oh, anything interesting?" He says, "There's a story here. This guy, he's been in the trenches for 20 years. He was told to, And Ollie goes, who would be that dumb?" And the guy shows him the newspaper, and Ollie looks at that, and it's a picture of Stan. And Ollie puts the paper down, and then he walks off about 2 yards, comes back, grabs the paper again, and he does that 5 times. Just does it, grabs the paper, looks at it, and which it's just a one. But then he goes to meet uh, Stan, who's now in an old soldiers' home.
Yeah.
And it's a scene. It's so dark. It could be in Inside Number 9. Now it's really. I wonder how it was met at the time. But so Ollie turned up. Stan's sitting in a wheelchair for some reason, and he can't get comfortable. So he ends up folding one leg under the other, which makes Ollie think that he's lost his leg
Yeah.
in the trenches somehow. So there's this whole scene where Ollie beautifully is trying to help Stan and trying to lift him and try and take him into the canteen. And of course, Stan's not helping in any way, shape, or form. He just goes along with it.
Yeah.
And it probably goes on for about 6 minutes, but it's hilarious. But at the same time, it's really, and of course, when Ollie realizes that Stan has still got both of his legs, it's both hilarious and it's Ollie's fury. But then the other issue, there's a brilliant bit where it doesn't quite work for me. Is it gets too modern because the cars are a bit too modern.
Yeah.
Now the kitchen's a bit too modern, and the film quality is a bit too modern, so it feels a little bit out of kilter. But also, what's brilliant about it, it has some really good examples of what Stan used to call the white magic. So when Stan used to light his thumb,
Yeah.
he wanted to light his pipe, so he'd click his thumb and his thumb would set on fire.
Yeah.
Which Ollie would always be. Ollie would never say to him, "How do you do that?" Ollie just would try and copy it. And
But he would try and do it, wouldn't he?
He would try and do it, but it never worked. And there was another one where Stan would blow on his thumb and his hat would go up. But in this one, there's a scene where Ollie manages to get into a fight with his next door neighbour, and they're going down the stairs to start this fight, which Stan is really looking forward to. And every time they go to another landing, there's a shadow of a blind on the landing wall, and Stan pulls the shadow down. He closes the shadow of the blind down, which is brilliant. And of course, after 4 floors, Ollie has to give it a go, and it actually works for a second, but then it shoots back up again, and Ollie did that. But it's just a brilliant example of little joke. It's like lesser comics would have just walked down the stairs,
Exactly.
basically. But here, Stan, and again, it was a film that Stan had a lot to do with in terms of the editing and the directing. Stan just saw an opportunity to come up with another joke as they went downstairs, and it's brilliant. But the reason it's there is basically for the double take. The reason my number one is there is for something that Ollie does, but the reason Blockheads is as high as number 4 is for that double take with the newspaper, because it's Ollie Hardy at his absolute best, and I don't know whether that was directing or whether Ollie instinctively knew that 5 times was enough to go back to the paper and just go. And for the information to sink in, but it's one more time you'd have gone, "Oh, you've done." It's like the bricks in the chimney. What if there'd been one more brick, you would have gone, "Oh, you've ruined it."
Yeah.
But with this, it just works perfectly. It's beautiful.
Yeah, there is some really good bits. I can remember that when he's fighting, because there's a little kid with like an American football, isn't there?
A horrible little kid.
And so they Stan or Ollie keeps picking his ball up and throwing it down the 5 or 6 flights of steps, and it always bounces and hits the guy in the reception full on in the face, and his hair goes everywhere. And then I think they're about to have a fight, and Stan pulls like just a glass of water out of his pocket and just takes a drink of it again, totally unexpected. And it's a really good film, that one. It's a really good film.
Well, there's also another moment where Stan ends up knocking out the boys, because the boy.
That's right.
The fight starts because the boy's kicking his American football and it hits Ollie in the face and he throws it down. But there's also a brilliant scene in a lift right at the start when Ollie eventually takes Stan into the apartment block where they're living, and the lift comes down and it's packed.
Yeah,
the lift's full of people, and you just hear this really deep voice going, "Out, please."
That's right.
And they stand aside, and this tiny little man comes out.
That's right.
And everybody just looks at it. But again, somebody has just said, "We can't just have the lift doors open. We have to have a joke."
There has to be I forgot about that one. Yeah. That is
and
so
it's good. It's just this tiny little fellow impeccably dressed in a straw hat, and they all just follow his progress out of the building. It's fantastic.
Is such a good one. Such a good one. Okay, my number 4. I'm going now. There wasn't obviously Stan used to have his trademark sort of smile. Or if he wasn't smiling, then he'd be crying because, I couldn't help it and all that kind of stuff. But when Stan Laurel used to really laugh, he seemed to look like a completely different person. So I'm going for Blotto. I don't know if you remember Blotto. So basically...
really early ones, 2019, one of their first talkies, isn't it?
Is it one of the early ones?
Yeah, really early.
But they basically, I think Stan is with his wife, and Ollie is trying to get him to come out. And bring a bottle as well, because he's got a bottle. The wife finds out about it, so decides to empty the bottle, the contents of the bottle, in the sink, and fills it up with cold tea and God knows what. And they go to this bar, and they're drinking this, and they're getting absolutely fucking pissed. And then the wife comes back, and she sat there with a gun. Because she's just gone and bought a gun, like a double-barreled shotgun, and she says to them, "What's so funny?" And they just start like hilariously laughing. And I don't think I've never seen anybody be able to like forcefully laugh as much as like Stan Laurel does. He did it in Way Out West as well, where he's getting tickled because they need to get the deeds off of him. But and then it's just beautiful because. He said, "Oh, we stole your liquor. We stole your liquor." They're both laughing. That wasn't liquor. That was cold tea. And then they both just stop straight, And then Ollie gives the bottle a quick sort of sniff and looks at the camera and just a little nod. It's so good. And then Stan is doing that child thing where he's sort of like running circles on, with his finger on the table and sort of looking very sheepish. It's just top class comedy. It's so good.
It happens quite a lot in their films that they alcohol makes them defiant. There's quite a few, like Sons of the Desert is a brilliant drunk sketch. But Blotto is fantastic because also it was made just after Prohibition had ended as well.
Right.
So there are a lot of parodies going on because people were suddenly getting drunk again legally. When they hadn't done for a long time. There's quite a few films like Them Nine Hills where Stan and Ollie go on a sort of camping trip.
That's
and
right.
They don't know that there's a group of illegal alcohol makers who have been raided, and the only way they can get rid of the alcohol is to throw it down the well. And of course, Stan and Ollie are there for medical health reasons.
Yeah.
And the doctor specifically told them that country water from a well is exactly what they need.
That's right.
So of course they're just drinking water from this well, and of course they start to feel really much better.
It's the iron in it, is what
It's
says, isn't it? It's the iron in it.
But Blotto's great because it takes them about 15 seconds to sober up.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's a perfect bit of acting with it because they're kids, but it's really interesting, the laughter thing, because one of Stan's most famous musical sketches was a drunk sketch, and Stan apparently played a brilliant drunk.
Oh, right.
Which was partly because he had a lot of experience because he liked to drink. So he as did Ollie, but Stan was a very good drunk actor or actor of drunks. But the laughter thing is really interesting because traditionally Stan wasn't a huge fan of the crying thing. And again, it's one of those things about Laurel and Hardy because when we grow up, people who impersonate Laurel and Hardy would always do
that's right,
the scratching the head. They'd always do the crying. And they'd always do here's another fine, But they didn't do that as much as those sort of things weren't in every film.
No,
and Stan didn't particularly like, but the laughing thing. Stan loved doing the laughing thing, and both, by all accounts. And it's beautiful to learn this. By all accounts, when Stan and Ollie were together, there was one brilliant contemporary report, and somebody said laughter is all you hear on the set. Like everybody just enjoyed doing those films and the sound of laughing. And there you can see times on the set where Stan is just gone. He's just because he loved it. Stan generally thought that Ollie was the funniest man he'd ever seen, and you can see times when Stan looks at Ollie. And they had to retake it because Stan's just laughing at Ollie. But Blotto's great. And it is that, again, it is that childish thing. They behave, because their drunkenness is it's almost how it's like teenagers having their first drinks, and
Yeah.
it all comes back to that defiant. Defiance is a word I use a lot about Stan and Ollie, which is how they behave towards the world and to how they ever get married in these films is beyond me.
It's like when when you were younger and you got pissed on a cider lolly. You have a cider lolly and think, "Oh, I'm smashed out of my head now."
Yeah.
Your number 3 was Way Out West, which we have spoken about earlier.
Yeah, I did. I should probably put some meat on those bones as well, because I actually still feel I've spent the because we had a little break.
We did
while you went away for a special holiday,
indeed,
to celebrate a special anniversary. And part of me felt guilty while you were away, thinking about, oh God, Way Out West should have been higher than 3. It's a film that means so much, because when I mentioned it to Ed, my son, he went, "Way Out West is number 3. Are you kidding?" Until I told him what the top 2 were, and he was all right with that. But Way Out West, the proper parody. But there's a couple of things. I didn't know this at the time. It turned out that Stan and Laurel loved westerns so much. This is why it was a proper parody, if you like. Probably the only film that was a proper parody. But he actually produced a series of westerns later on in the 30s. I can't remember if it was Lucky Mix or Lucky Star, but and of course Stan had appeared in a load of silent westerns as well. So Ollie rather had appeared in a lot of silent westerns as a heavy. So they both loved the genre. But the reason Ed was really cross it is only number 3 because it was my dad's favourite film.
Oh right.
We talked about my dad and Laurel and Hardy earlier on.
Yeah. And
he loved Way. If my dad, God rest his soul, was ever getting a bit fractious, we'd go, right, okay, we'll put Way Out West on. My dad was, if he was still with us, he would do the top 10 westerns with you.
Would he?
Right, yeah. And if you think my ones take a lot of recording, his ones would have taken a lot of recording, because he may not have. He'd go, "I'll tell you what my favourite is. That one with the fellow with the fellow with the big hat, he got on a horse." My dad loved westerns. And he loved Laurel and Hardy, so Way Out West for him was like the perfect combination,
right?
Basically, so I have felt a little bit guilty about that not being higher in mine. But again, every time I do your podcast, you come away thinking, as you're doing it, you're thinking, "Oh, it should be higher."
I know.
Why isn't that higher?
It is kind of the bane of our lives in regards to putting these top 10s together, because, to be fair, I'm looking at my top 10 and what we did from sort of 10 to 6. Any of those could be my number 1.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Any of them could be.
But isn't it strange, though, Pav, how proprietorial you get with these things? How it suddenly makes you realise how important a part of your life they have been.
Absolutely. And
also how cross you would be if somebody... It's like when Ed said, Ed challenges my view, as a son should do. But you go, "No, hang on, I'll tell you who's number 3 in my top 10."
That's right.
You do your own top. You get invited on.
Exactly.
To do top 10. But also, if somebody was to say, when people say to me, "I don't really like Laurel and Hardy," it's like saying I don't like football. I'm done. I'm gone. If people say to me, I don't get Disney films, they shouldn't really be shown these days, that's it. I'm out of this conversation. It's like, if you're not capable of talking about politics, philosophy, football, and Disney, then I don't really want your company anymore. And I bet you found this as well, Pav. I bet you find that people go, "Okay, right, he's got this brilliant knowledge of movie culture, of science fiction culture. He probably doesn't know about politics. He probably doesn't know about philosophy." But of course you do.
Yeah.
But people assume, they pigeonhole you. They just go, "Right, you have to know one thing or the other." It's the same with football fans. You go, if you still get this attitude today, if you're a football fan, what are you doing going to the theatre?
Yeah. But isn't it also that I've had it before where people have said to me, not nastily, but they sort of go, "You know a lot about stuff that doesn't really matter."
Of course it matters.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas things like politics and I've consciously said, you ask me what my passport number is and what my national insurance number is, I haven't got a clue. But if you want me to tell you who was the DP on A New Hope, I can tell you those kind of things. So
but the thing is, if you start saying things that don't matter, in the final analysis, the only thing that matters is medical science.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that matters is keeping people alive. Anything else beyond that is frippery. You can say, well, history doesn't matter, geography doesn't matter, science doesn't matter, films. Of course, they matter. They
Yeah.
enrich you. I generally don't believe that anyone who is obsessed with films or obsessed with Disney could be a bad person.
Mm.
And I just think it enriches. It just gives you more context. It gives you more variety. It gives you the ability to talk to more people for a start off.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, what you just said about Way Out West and about how that your memories with your father about that, I've got the same thing where, like I said to you earlier on, Friday nights was myself, my brother, and my dad watching Laurel and Hardy. And that's one of my earliest memories.
Yeah.
So to say that something like that is frivolous and it doesn't matter, it's what it means to you as a singular person for your own memories, let alone whether it changed the world or some people like Laurel and Hardy and some people don't. For us personally, Disney, Laurel and Hardy, football, all of that kind of stuff means everything to us.
But you talk about, science fiction is not particularly my thing. I love Doctor Who, but Star Wars and stuff, it sort of passed me by. But of course, I appreciate how important it is to you. But when we talk about Disney films, for example, and people will dismiss them, and you go, it took 3 years to make those films.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about Snow White, the first ever. Do you know how long it took to make that?
Yeah.
Do you know how many people told Walt Disney it couldn't be done? It's the same with Laurel and Hardy film. It might be 26 minutes on the screen. It took 3 months to make. And it took the top experts in Hollywood to make it. It took comedians and writers and with 30, 40 years of experience going back to the musical to make those things. Star Wars, you can dismiss them as you like, but this is an example I use, Michael, when people talk about my trade, comedy, stand-up comedy, and people say to me, "Oh, Michael McIntyre is a terrible comic." He's not. What you mean is you don't like him.
Yeah.
Michael McIntyre is actually a brilliant comic. Technically, I'm happy with the fact that I put 2 pairs of socks in the washing machine. 2 pairs of socks come out. I don't know what's happening in Michael's house for the socks to disappear. But Michael is a fantastic comic technically, and I remember being on the train home last year, the last train home from Victoria. There's a group of girls got on the train, and they're just the happiest girls you've ever met. And it transpired they'd been to see Michael McIntyre.
Oh, right.
And they were just on the train on the way home. And I'm sitting there securing my knowledge as a vaguely known left-wing comic who will one day bring this government down, as I one day took Thatcher down after just 11. It took Mark Thomas and I 11 years, but we got her out
in the end.
But these girls spent the whole journey home. They got off at the same station as me and all. They just spent the whole journey home going, that bit when he said this, and that bit, your Terry says that. And it's just like Michael McIntyre made them really happy. And Laurel and Hardy, Walt Disney, Star Wars makes us really happy.
Yeah.
And how can anyone complain about that? And Star Wars films, the amount of effort it takes to make those bloody things,
Exactly.
only for people to dismiss them. If you don't like them, fine. You don't like them, don't watch them. But don't turn around and say, they're rubbish. How can an adult watch this sort of thing? Go away. Look,
I've always said, I mean, for me, Star Wars is in my DNA.
Yeah.
So, and it always will be. It doesn't matter what kind of crap that Disney do put out. Like you say, there are hundreds of people that are creating that stuff, and they will do. And it doesn't matter. It's whatever is your bag, isn't it? It's whatever you find that you're passionate about.
But even the Star Wars film that you least like, which I think you mentioned, I kind of zoomed out of that bit. But even the Star Wars film you most like, that took thousands of people.
Yeah,
and they didn't set out to make a film you didn't like.
That's the thing.
Nobody sets out to make a bad TV show.
No.
Well, no, they don't. They said, people set out to make the best TV show they can make within the constraints of their budget, their time, and so on. So I never ever go at people. It's like if you love Star Wars, great, brilliant, great. talk about it all the time. Why not? It's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so my number 3, I'm going again with one of these moments that's like the minutiae of the actual agony, and it's in Busybodies when Ollie's got a paintbrush beard and Stan gives him a full-on shave with a sand planer, basically, an old-fashioned sand. And it's the moment when I think the first time he does it, and it's a horrible scratching sound when it's going over Ollie's sort of top lip. It's the second time that he does it, and Ollie is kind of moving his mouth around because it's obviously stung so much. It's so clever. They're using stuff in a normal, like in a hardware kind of in a factory, to give Ollie this. It is so good.
It's one of those things that, so oddly enough, this came up in a conversation. It's every now and again, especially if we're working on Have I Got News For You, we'll occasionally talk about the fact that you can't really teach people comedy. You can, in a way, but every now and again, we'll come up with a joke on Have I Got News For You. And if you look at it out of context, we will say, right, if we're showing this to a student, we'll ask the student to retrofit that. How did we get from that really bizarre punchline? What was the start of that conversation?
Right.
And that bit in Busybodies was it's one of those things where I always say, if you're saying to somebody, you need to learn about comedy and how it works, it's like, I will show you the picture of Ollie with the paintbrush stuck to his chin, and I want you to tell me how that paintbrush ended up on his chin. Because I guarantee they won't be able to work out the set of circumstances by which and it's also that's got the brilliant sequence where he's got his fingers trapped in a window.
That's right.
It's not a window; it's a window frame.
Window frame. That's right.
That Stan tries various ways to get him out of, which mainly involve hitting Ollie's fingers.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, because it's a whole film there's a film called Tit for Tat against Charlie Hall.
That's right.
The whole film of Tit for Tat, where Them Thar Hills was the first one. Because when they're drunk from the well, it turns out the couple in the next cottage is Charlie Hall and Mae Bush, who we talked to. And then the next film, Tit for Tat, Ollie and Stan bought a shop, and then Charlie Hall, the same character's got the shop next door to them.
That's right.
And they just end up mutually destroying the whole thing. But in Busybodies, it's just the best slaps, because all they do is find ways to hurt each other, essentially.
Yeah.
But there's so just a simple thing. It starts with Stan's got nowhere to hang his coat because all the coat hooks are taken. So of course, what he does is get a nail, puts it into the wall to hang his coat on, and it goes straight for a water pipe.
Yeah.
So that's the start of the chaos, and it ends, and then from there it ends up with the car being sawed in half by a giant buzzsaw. But that bit where Ollie ends up with a paintbrush on his chin. But the fact that he gets the handle off, the fact the only way you can get rid of that is to shave it. And as you say, and again, the sound effect, like you say, it's this rasping, because it cuts away at one stage to somebody planing a bit of wood.
That's right.
And Stanley's shaves. That's a really good choice. I mean, again, Busybodies is one that could easily have been in this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put the clip on the video playlist for our Patreon subscribers, but even if you watch it just for the sound, the ASMR of the sound effect is it's brutal, because it is just, and the way that, like I say, the way that Ollie sort of he goes with his mouth, because it just looks so sore. But it's
it's also that there's one moment where Ollie realizes probably the only way to get rid of this paintbrush beard is to let Stan shave it off.
Yeah,
it doesn't occur to him perhaps he might like to do it, but there's a moment where Ollie just, as he does in many films, he just gives in to the inevitable and sort of braces himself. Because that's the beauty of all the films. It's a bit like Tom and Jerry. It's like they all exist. Them Thar Hills and Tit for Tat is an unusual example of two films that follow on from each other. But most of them exist in a vacuum. It's like whatever has happened before, because otherwise you watch them and you go, hang on a second, Ollie, you've had enough pain from Stan to know this is not going to work out.
Exactly.
Well, but you just have to trust that each film is a separate a separate scenario.
Yeah.
And that nothing in Ollie's life till that stage has indicated that Stan's going to.
Because, like you said, how do they keep getting married? How do they keep ending up getting jobs? Because nobody would touch them.
Of course they would. Hollywood's not that big a place. Word would get round.
Exactly. Okay, then, Kevin, your number 2, then, please.
Well, my number 2, talking of marriage, and again, there's part of me that feels guilty about this not being number 1. Number 2, Sons of the Desert, which I think a lot of people, both in the Laurel and Hardy world and outside it, Sons of the Desert is also the name of the Laurel and Hardy fan club.
That's right. Myself and my brother were members.
So each area has a different film tent.
Yes, that's right.
Sons of the Desert is, if Ed and I are in the house separately, we would probably put different Laurel and Hardy films on. If Ed and I are in the house together, there'll be some bickering, but eventually it'll be Sons of the Desert because, again, this is one. It's the first Laurel and Hardy film that Ed really got into as a 7-year-old. To the extent that he even got his granddad to buy him a little ukulele thing.
Oh, really?
He taught himself how to do Honolulu Baby.
Honolulu Baby.
Honolulu Baby.
Where'd you get those eyes?
And it's just the most. And again, not only is so Ollie's married to the brilliant Mae Bush, Australian actress who's the best wife, probably. Maybe Daphne Pollard, the tiny one. But Ollie's married, but Stan is married. But Stan is married to the country's leading female duck shooter.
That's right.
Played by Dorothy Christie, who is not always there because she's off shooting ducks. I mean, she's and Stan and Ollie are members of this kind of Freemason type group, and the leader of the group, the exalted ruler, or as Stan calls him, the exhausted ruler, tells them that they all have to go to the convention in Chicago, and on the way back from in the taxis, Stan says, "I can't. My wife won't let me go to the convention in Chicago." And there's this whole brilliant speech of Ollie going, "A man has to be the master in his own house. You just put your foot down." And Stan's going, "You haven't met my." So there's spirit. So obviously, cut to Ollie's wife going, "No, there's no way you're going to the convention in Chicago." So they come up with this scheme whereby Ollie will pretend to have a nervous breakdown, and they'll get a doctor in, and the doctor will say, "Well, you've got to go away. You need to get some fresh air." So Ollie pretends to have a nervous breakdown by basically going, "Oh," a lot.
That's right. Yes.
And the wonderful James Finlayson turns up, but he's not a doctor; he's a vet.
That's right.
So there's a brilliant line where Ollie says to Stan, "Why did you get a veterinarian?" And he says, "Well, I didn't think his religion would make any difference." Which is again, and of course, but because James Finlayson's a vet, he checks the temperature of Ollie's nose. He looks at it. But eventually, he says that they've got to go away on holiday. So they tell their partners that they're going to the mountains. And then but they end up, instead they say they're going to holiday, whatever.
Yeah.
But then it turns out that his wife, the two wives think that they've been on his ship. They're not now, so they're told to go away to Honolulu.
That's right.
They're told to go to Honolulu to get some warm tropical air, and Stan has to go as well. So they go to Honolulu, and on the way back, the ship sinks. There's a ship from Honolulu sinks. So the two wives think that Stan and Ollie are on the ship, and they're at the office waiting for news. And they go to the cinema and go, let's go and try and relax. They go to cinema, and at the cinema is a newsreel of the convention from Chicago, and there's Stan and Ollie front and center flirting with girls on the newsreel, and there's this whole
waving at the camera,
and to the extent that Ollie waves at the camera, goes back out of shot and comes back and waves at the camera again.
That's right, yeah.
But then there's this whole thing where, so they go home and the boys come back home, pretend that they've been in Honolulu, and then the two women, and then they hide in the house. There's no point describing the plot, but it just ends with the two wives asking them to tell the truth, and saying, if you tell the truth, it'll be fine. And Ollie keeps lying, and eventually Stan cracks and tells his duck hunting wife, who's holding a gun.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
He just Stan decides that he should. So the final scene is just Stan being fed grapes by his wife. He's in a silk dressing gown. He's got a cocktail in one hand, and all we can hear next door is. But it's just. It's just a detail. And it's again. Do you know what I feel? It should have been my number one, but out of all the longer films, Way Out West and this one, they're just way out ahead of most comedy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it's just in Sons of the Desert in particular. It's character driven. It's Sons of the Desert is the film where I say when people say, "Oh, it's just childish slapstick." You watch Sons of it's not at all.
No,
it's clever character driven comedy. Their wives are fully rounded characters in it as well, or as fully rounded as women ever are in Laurel and Hardy. There's some great set pieces when they go on this. I think they're called the Shriners, aren't they? The Mason type thing, and it's just. But again, it's this defiance thing. It's this whole. The only way they can't, they can't just say to their wives, "No, look, we're going anyway." They have to find this elaborate ploy, and they just get caught up in their own lies. But it's just really clever. And again, if it had been Inside Number 9 could do that. That could be an Inside Number 9 plot.
Yes, agree.
Yeah, I mean, the two blokes lying to their wives about where they're being and getting caught out and eventually trying to get out. But it's just joy. I keep using that word. It's just joyful. It's just, and it's one of those films as well when I watch it with Ed. And Ed's got this annoying habit. It's like, if we're watching something that Ed wants to watch, everyone has to be quiet. Everyone's like, shush, quiet now. All right. If Ed's decided what we're watching, he can stop and start it at will.
Oh, right, okay.
Right. So if I'm watching, if I've said, let's watch Sons of the Desert, he'll go, yeah, great. And 5 minutes in, I'll go, hang on a second, I don't remember that bit. And he'll go, no, whoa, shush. So we have to watch the whole film and then go back to it. Whereas Ed's like a live director's cut.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, but again, my point being that when you watch this film with Ed, every time there's something new, there's something different in it, and for a film that was made in 1933, that's incredible.
That's a mark of a great movie, though, isn't it? That you watch something new, you find something new in it.
Yeah.
I get that with Airplane. Like every time I watch Airplane, there's a new joke that I just haven't seen, and I've seen that film. I don't know how many times I've seen that film. But that is a good one.
I get it as I love the films of Powell and Pressburger,
right?
And Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, and I Know Where I'm Going. It's like when people ask me what my favourite films are, I'll have to go, well, my first 5 favourite films are Powell and Pressburger. But Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which is like an old friend to me, I probably watch it 10 times. If I'm really happy, I'll watch it. If I'm really grumpy, I'll watch it. It's like a family member. But every time I see it, I watched I Know Where I'm Going twice last week, and I'm going to watch it again tonight because there are just bits in it where you go, I need to watch that. You just get this thing in your head where you just go, I need to watch that for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I'll take 6 months off, but then you revisit it. It's like going back to see Sunflowers by Van Gogh.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm in London and I've got an hour to kill, I mean, I'll go to the National Gallery and look at a Van Gogh picture or a Pizarro picture.
Yeah.
And you've looked at it for 30 years, but there's always a little bit you go, I didn't notice that bit in the corner before.
Yeah.
And when you could do that with Star Wars as well, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
And also, it's like, you always feel like, wouldn't it be great to say to George Lucas or to Van Gogh, mate, after all this time, your work's still giving me pleasure.
Yeah. I mean, well, you could say that, say Laurel and Hardy, which is nearly 100 years old.
Yeah.
And it's still giving people pleasure. So
which is why I have to say, I know Doctor Who's not in your top 10, but one of the best Doctor Who episodes ever is the Matt Smith one, where they take Vincent van Gogh.
That's right.
To the Louvre, and Bill Nye as the art historian. He says, "Who's the best artist?" Everybody goes Van Gogh. It's just beautifully done. It makes me emotional every time.
Yeah.
The idea that this person realizes that his work is important, and it's like, that's why I always say to people, if I go and see something and I meet them, if I go and see it's like I went to see Miles Jupp last week, as my wife's looking after him, and it's a brilliant show.
Yeah.
And I know, Mum, you have to make a point of saying to him afterwards, that was great, that's so good. because people who create these things need to be told how important they are to people who consume them, for want of a better word.
Yeah,
You know.
and I also think I don't think it matters how small it is. I mean,
No.
I met up with a few people from that live in America when I was over on holiday, and one of them said to me, they said, "Your podcast helped me through some really dark days."
That's brilliant. Isn't
And
it?
I thought to myself, and I said to her, I said, "It's mad because I'm in my little shed. I don't feel like anybody else is going to listen. So to hear you saying that," and she said, "You just got me through days when I
mate,
really,"
that's-
and I went, and I was nearly in tears because I went, "That's just like one of the nicest things I've ever heard for something that is very little and small fry like we are. To have one person say that to you makes it all absolutely worth that you're doing it. You know."
But that probably means you can extrapolate from that one person that probably 100, 500 people feel that way. And
Possibly.
there is something about the nature of podcasting as well. It's the only thing I can sort of liken it to is Radio 4 20, 30 years ago when people it's like my wife Ali looks after the Punt and Dennis, and they've just finished the Now Show. But there are people who grew up listening to the Now Show. People are very protective to Radio 4. But I find podcasts are replacing that. People find the podcast and they love it and they become disciples of it and they tell people all about it. And I know where you're coming from, but that's beautiful that somebody says to you,
Yeah.
it got me through. And that's why it's important that you keep doing it and you keep doing it and it arrives at the time you say it's going to arrive.
Exactly.
And the idea, it's brilliant. The idea that people look forward to what you're, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree.
And,
So,
and also for that to happen in America as well.
yeah. I always say thank you, Kim, for that because it was Kim.
Well, also you'll hi Kim, because you'll make Kim will be so chuffed that you mentioned her.
Yeah.
You know, it's a wonderful thing that what you've done is important enough for.
Yeah, it really sort of touched me. It really did. So I would thank.
Of course
you
it did, and also, I imagine you couldn't wait to tell your wife. You couldn't wait to tell other people because.
Well, exactly, because I mean, the thing is, like I say, you sometimes when you're in the whole thing of editing and all that kind of stuff, you think, oh God, I've got to use my like Saturday morning or my Sunday to do it all, and what's the point? Because is anybody really listening out there? So to hear that from somebody from a different country just meant, well, like you say, you extrapolate that to maybe 10 times that or however what it is. But
But even if in the unlikely event that it's only Kim,
it still doesn't matter.
That's enough.
Absolutely, it's enough.
That's good enough. And also, because people might say, "Oh, what are you doing tonight?" I'm doing this brilliant podcast, top 10 of everything. I've done Disney films. I've done Walker and Wise, done Laurel and Ollie. Go, oh right, you're doing anything important? It's like, yeah. Disney films, Laurel and Hardy, Morecambe and Wise.
Yes.
And it's like, and it's changed people. If you don't like the sound of that podcast, don't listen to it.
No, exactly. There's more than enough podcasts for you to listen to.
There are other options out there.
Absolutely, there are.
If you do like the sound, and also I think as well, what happens is with podcasts, you become part of people's routine.
Yes.
You become people say, I listen to it in the gym, or I listen to it walking the dog, or I listen to it on Sunday morning. And also, I think, had you started during COVID?
Well, we had another podcast that we were doing. We were doing a This Country podcast,
right?
We were doing that during COVID.
Because I think COVID really drove people to podcasts as well, and I think for a lot of people that it becomes, like I say, it becomes part of their routine, and also it's nice for people like Kim to know that there are people like her in the world who take these things seriously, but also take them seriously enough, but not so seriously that they can't take the piss out of the fact that they're taking them seriously.
Exactly. I completely agree.
Which comes back to that conversation we had, which really annoys me when people will look down at the stuff we like. It's like we know it's not medical stuff. We know that.
Yeah.
We acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, 95% of it of us loves it to bits. We know it's a slightly strange thing to love, and we're the first ones to say that. But that means you can't say that.
No, And you love what you love, I think, is
Yeah,
the thing.
of course.
Absolutely. Okay, so my number 2 was Stan hides from Ollie in Toad in the Hole, which we did speak about before, because that was in your. So it's time now then, Kevin, for your number 1. What is your number 1 Laurel and Hardy moment?
My number 1 Laurel and Hardy moment is from The Fixer Uppers in 1935, which we have mentioned before because it's got the greatest telephone joke ever. It's a long distance from Atlanta, Georgia. We talked about that. But also, it's not. There aren't many people, there aren't many Laurel and Hardy experts who would say that The Fixer Uppers was one of their best short films. It's in the. No one would say it was their worst.
No.
It's a strange film because you can't quite work out whether it's meant to be in America or France. But basically, in The Fixer Uppers, Stan and Ollie are Christmas card salesmen. It's set in July, so they're having trouble selling Christmas cards door to door. There's one brilliant scene where a man who's drunk is got a hangover. You know he's got a hangover because he's got an ice bag on his head.
Yeah.
And he opens the door and they try to sell him some Christmas cards and he's not interested. And then for some reason, Ollie says to Stan, try him one with Mother. And it's like, Happy Christmas, Mother, you're the best. And the drunk man starts crying. And it's important because later on they meet the drunk man in a bar and he's so drunk, the barman won't serve him. So he gets Ollie and Stan to buy him drinks and insists that they have, so they end up very drunk. But there's just a bit, it's one particular scene. So they end up knocking on this woman's, this door, and a woman answers it. And it's an artist studio. And she's upset about something. So Ollie, being the gentleman, asked, what's something? And she says, "Oh, my husband, my marriage is not happy. He's an artist. He's a very volatile man. He's French. And Ollie says, well, what you need to do is you have to make him jealous." And she says, "Well, how do you mean?" And Ollie says, it's a surefire thing. So what happened? When's he coming home? Well, he'll be home in an hour. She says, right, okay. Well, so how are we going to make him jealous? And Ollie says, well, if you need to kiss Stan, and if you come in while you're kissing Stan, and if he's jealous, you'll know that he does love you. And Stan's not sure about this plan, but it goes along with it. And she's not sure about this plan. It goes along, and Ollie says, you better have a rehearsal. So they practice a kiss. So what you need to know, so this was just after the Hays Code had been introduced into Hollywood, and the Hays Code was the authorities thought that Hollywood films were getting a bit too racy,
right?
And there was too much romance and too much sexy talk going on. So the Hays Code was introduced. So, for example, if a man and a woman were in a bedroom, they both had to have, like snooker, they both had to have at least 1 foot on the floor.
Oh, right, okay.
And screen kisses couldn't last more than 3 seconds.
Oh, right.
So what happens is that she reluctantly says, all right, let's practice this kiss. And she grabs Stan, and it's about 2 minutes of kissing. But because of the Hays, it's a parody, it's taking the piss out of the Hays Code. So every 3 or 4 seconds, they cut away from the kiss to Ollie and Ollie's reaction to the kiss.
Right.
Which goes from bemused to exasperated to there's one brilliant bit where she's kissing him still, and it cuts to Ollie, and Ollie's looking at his watch to check how long this kiss is going on. And it goes back to the kiss, and the next time he's tapping his watch to see if it's still going. And it's just wonderful. It's just not. It's all Ollie. It's just 90 seconds of Ollie reacting. So it's kiss, cut to Ollie, kiss, cut to Ollie, and again, it's the perfect amount of silence. But it's hilarious. It is my all-time favourite 90 seconds of film comedy. And then at the end, they both faint because this kiss has been so intense. They both.
You know what? I need to watch this because I do not remember this one for some reason.
But it ends. So anyway, it ends up. Well, my husband's coming, and they go in, and she starts to kiss Stan, and he's not jealous. He's furious, and the husband comes along, and she starts to kiss Ollie. Right, and the husband's not jealous; he's furious. So he challenges Ollie to a duel, and it all plays out.
Oh, right. Okay.
But it's the kiss is just it adds to the value once you know that they're taking the piss out of the Hayes Code. But it's just you talk about Ollie Stan laughing, Stan kissing is just hilarious because his face changes every
Right.
time because he goes from reluctant to really really into it. And obviously, it's a very 1930s film kiss.
Yeah.
Their lips are touching, but there's no tongues or anything. But it's just, I don't think there's a better. You talk about Airplane as a comedy film you keep coming back to. I don't think there's a better bit of comedy acting than Ollie in that film. Doesn't
Right.
say a word. He just reacts to the kiss. And it's just brilliant. And it's a different reaction every time. It's fantastic.
I need to find
It's
that.
brilliant, and it's not like I say. I don't think many people would have it in there. It's certainly not their best film. It's even bad. There's no such thing as a bad Laurel and Hardy film. But even
No.
their best film, even sometimes I admit they will labour a joke.
Yeah.
Sometimes, or the scenario isn't really. But, and this is a strange one. The fact that they're selling Christmas cards in July is great. The fact that it's kind of, I think the barman is sort of French. So you don't know where it's meant to be from, but anyway, but it's not their best film, but that's not not being Laurel Hardy's best film is still very high praise. But that 90 seconds of comedy for me is the essence of funny. I don't think there's a funnier moment that I could find anywhere in any film.
Right.
That I could say to you is funnier than that.
Yeah, I need to find that so I can watch it. It sounds familiar, but I don't think I've seen that for a long.
Well,
time.
there was a silent version as well, which I think was them selling Christmas trees
right
in July, which ended up, but again, any Laurel and Hardy experts listening here, I don't do that thing where I watch the film before I come and talk to you. I just rely on my instinctive memory of what happened. So if I've got films in slightly the wrong way around, but I know that 90 seconds is just fantastic.
Cool. And I've just noticed YouTube has got the full episode, the full movie.
Has.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I can watch that and put that on the video playlist for everybody else. Okay, my number one. Now this is my favourite Laurel and Hardy short, and it is Bratz.
Oh,
so Stan and Ollie, and Ollie play their own sons.
Yeah.
And basically the wives have gone out, so they are babysitting their two sons, and the two sons are being little shits, basically.
And they're in really sort of sailor costumes, aren't they? Like little.
They're in little. That's right, little sailor costumes, and Ollie doesn't have his tash. Ollie has shaved his tash off.
Right.
And they finally get them to bed. And they're at the top of the stairs, and I think Stan says something like, "See, just be kind to them." and Ollie looks at Stan and says, "You're right. A little kindness goes a long way." And there's a perfectly placed what are they called? Skate on the top of the stairs.
Right, yeah.
Ollie does that, and then they do this amazing thing where it's obviously sped up, but Ollie is scooting down the bottom, falling down the stairs on his ass, and has a pair of false legs that he's holding that are just like sticking up, and it is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
Do you know what? I'd forgotten Bratz as well, because it's brilliant because as kids they exactly mirror their parents' relationship to each other.
They do, absolutely, they do.
And it is one of those where it just escalates, and they keep trying to hide the stuff that they've done. But also as well, it's like funny enough. I was talking, Ed, like Lord of the Rings is a massive thing for him. We're talking about the original Lord of the Rings films and how clever they are with the perspective to make the hobbits look smaller.
Yes.
And there's an element of that in Bratz, but essentially they just have giant props.
That's right.
So they've just got giant chairs,
yes,
and giant tables, which must have taken some building. But it does kind of work, and to an audience in the early 30s, it must have been quite special. Actually.
And I can imagine that the budget for it must have been quite big because there's an animated mouse.
Yeah,
If
of
you
course.
remember, yeah, because the
Yeah.
animated mouse ends up sort of like dancing or climbing onto
Yeah.
Ollie's ass, and Stan
Yeah.
shoots him with a pop gun
The
kind
pop
of
gun with
thing.
the cork comes out on the
The
string.
cork comes out, and then that means that they've
Yeah.
got Ollie has to go into the bathroom, and Stan is sort of slapping water onto it, and all of a sudden this liniment goes down the back of his trousers.
Which is really hot.
It's just so good. Stan and Ollie are downstairs trying to play pool or whatever it is, or snooker.
Yeah.
And they rip the cloth, and it's just so good. But that
and
one,
they keep hearing this. They keep hearing noises and decide not to investigate.
indeed.
Yeah, that's great.
Why don't you brats go to bed? And then obviously Ollie has to sing because Mama usually sings to us. So. And now that song with my granddaughter. Miss Alea is the granddaughter. There was a time when I would hold her in my arms and sing "Go to Sleep, My Baby," and she would go to sleep. Oh my God! It was one of the
I forgot that. That's brilliant.
It's so good.
Oh, fantastic.
But for me, it's my favourite, and that's the one that reminds me of my dad and my brother in that on a Friday afternoon.
But that's really lovely because it comes back to we talked about in the first part how. There's still bits of Laurel and Hardy dialogue that we use in day-to-day conversation. Soda, and the fact that you're actually rocking an actual baby to sleep with Laurel is just that's fantastic.
Yodelly.
Brilliant.
So good.
That's fantastic.
Dear. Right, we've got a couple of honourable mentions. At Theo Delaney said, "Sons of the Desert," the wax apple. That was an amazing bit. The way he eats he's hiding the fact that he's eating the apple.
And she said, she eventually says, "I wondered where all the
yeah.
Have you had Theo on, by the way?
No, not yet. No.
Oh, get Theo on.
Yeah,
he's great. Theo's great value.
Absolutely. At Robert Ray says, when Stan gets his head stuck behind the mast in Toad in the Hole and has to saw himself free.
Yeah.
At Recruitment Copy said, the scene in the music box when Stan shouts to Ollie, "He don't want me, he wants the other monkey, you." Or County Hospital when Ollie says, "Hard-boiled eggs and nuts."
Again, that's bubbling under for me as well because that's something we always say now.
If anybody is making hard-boiled eggs and nuts,
how do you want your eggs?
That's it, exactly.
That's great.
At Wiley Baggy said their dance to "At the Ball That's All" in Way Out West.
Yeah.
At Sidwell to Tony is Laurel and Hardy washing up. That is another great. I can't remember which episode that is. Which...
it's not Help Mooch.
It's
it
not.
It ends up with the gas being turned on and not lit.
That's right. Isn't that Blockheads?
No, is it? It might be Blockheads.
I think it might be Blockheads.
It might be Blockheads
because he's helping. He's helping
with
a
couple of washing up scenes. Yeah, but that's a good.
That is a good one. At Tim Thumb, Men of War and Soda. And what will you have, Stanley?
Soda.
At Space X Cadet says, "Does this train go to Pottsville?" Birthmarks, 1929.
I had a Space X Cadet when we first mentioned this. Got quite cross with me on because when he said this will be in your top 10, and I was non-committal.
You were, that's right.
But that's a great scene when they're trying to change engine.
It is. And the final one at Michael 06553224 said, "My brother had their music played at his funeral as he was lowered. He adored Stan and Ollie."
Mate.
So what a great way to finish there. So thank you for that, Michael. That's it. The longest podcast we've ever done, like 4 weeks, or whatever it was. But once again, how is your podcast going, Kevin? The Price of Football.
Well, it's still going, but mainly because people in football keep giving us things to talk about.
I mean, do you take a hiatus once the season finishes, or
no, not at all. It's really interesting. The general election was called, which meant that the football governance bill didn't get through in time.
So I saw that today. Yeah,
independent regular thing. It was luckily, football finance continues all. It comes back to you talking about Kim. We've found as well that it's become a regular part of so many people's routines that every now and again we might deliver one a day late, and we tell people that
Yeah,
and
yeah,
why.
yeah.
But for the most part, we keep delivering 2 pods, and partly because we both really enjoy doing it. To
Yeah.
be perfectly honest, and partly because we get the Kims of this world saying the same thing to us.
Mm.
You know, and it just means a lot. I'm sure our expectations were like yours when you don't know what's going to happen, and I'm still probably like you, slightly baffled as to why people have homed in on it. But you just go, well, they have, so let's carry on.
The thing is,
You know.
especially with your podcast, what I find fascinating about it, and the fact that obviously Kieran is you listen to Talk Sport or BBC, he'll crop up every so often as the voice of somebody who knows what they're talking about. And the thing with football, especially the football finance, it is such a massive beast now compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, that it's I find it so interesting to have you are kind of like us in the podcast. You're asking the questions that we want to hear from somebody that knows the intricacies of football finance, and I find it fascinating, but I also find
I think oddly we're part of the reason why it has become a massive beat in the last 5 years. I think the fact that football fans it's become a bit of a nuisance in the pub before Palace games now. Is that people will come up and ask me questions I can't possibly answer.
right.
But the difference between your pod is like I can get away with being an idiot on my one because Kieran's got absolute integrity.
Yeah.
Kieran's got absolute credibility.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. We had our 500th episode recently, and we interviewed Swiss Ramble for it, who is the Kieran's inspiration. Who is the ultimate go-to guy for football finance. And essentially, I left them to it. I asked a couple of questions and then basically backed out because it was just fascinating. It's like being the referee in an Ali Foreman fight. Basically,
Right.
it's like I could throw a punch or two here, but there's not much point.
No.
But I think the difference is that with your pod, and I have to say I'm a guest on a lot of people's pods, and yours is the one I enjoy most doing.
Wow.
Is that both people need some because you're an expert, for want of a better word, on many things, but you're on the things that you're not an expert. So on this pod, your one, both guests need to be 7 out of 10 in terms of knowledge, but the 3 out of 10 is made up for an enthusiasm.
Yeah, I would say so.
Whereas on my one, Kieran always has to be 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
On knowledge. And then it doesn't really matter what I say because Kieran eventually will get distracted by the theme tune of Hong Kong Phooey.
And who wouldn't?
Or which was the best Thunderbird, you know what I mean? But it's like our younger listeners kind of go, let them get on with it because they know we eventually will get on to discussing Aiden Hazard's latest bonus, even though he retired 6 months ago.
Right, yeah.
But our pod needs Kieran. I sometimes feel for Kieran because Kieran can't make mistakes. If Kieran ever makes a mistake, in the same way, I mean, you'd be upset if you said something about Star Wars 9 and people picked you up on it, you'd be upset. With him, it's a professional disaster.
Yeah.
When people say to me, I think you accidentally said Australia rather than New Zealand, I go, probably. Yeah. And I'm not going to apologise. I may well have done, yeah. But, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. But again, anybody that is a football fan, I've put the link in the show notes. Please go and listen to it because it's what it's what you said about. I've got a staple of podcasts that I listen to every week when I'm at work, and yours is one of them. So and for you to say that again, what we said about Kim, for someone like yourself, who I mean, it's nice to think that you call me mate. Do you know what I mean? Someone like yourself, and to say that you enjoy coming on our podcast, it means the absolute world because I've got no right for you to be on our podcast because you're a different level to us, if that makes sense.
well, it's nice of you to say so, but it sort of doesn't in podcasting. So, and when I get asked to do a lot, and when you first asked me, you go, oh, fine,
Give
let's
it a
see if
go.
we can give it a go. Let's see what we can go. But I so enjoyed the first one, and it comes down to enthusiasm. That's what makes it so much fun to do. And one of the reasons I love Kieran so much is that I chose, or we discussed things to talk about. We went for Disney songs, and we went for Walk 'Em and Wise, and then we went for Lauren Hardy. And Kieran went straight for top 10 Northern
The
songs.
songs from Manchester, yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
Kieran, for the love of God, it's like, give them something. They've got to pretend to be enthused. And I love that. Kieran and I have got many things in common when it comes to music. I love the Smiths. I love Joy Division.
Yeah.
I love Buzzcocks. Even I wouldn't want to. Sometimes my top 10 music list, I can't sit through it.
Well,
sometimes.
to be fair, I was glad that Google was about, because I found out that the Bee Gees and 10cc classed as Manchester bands. So
it's something I find myself for Kieran. Sometimes you're just nodding along because you just go, well, of course, it's like Stuart Lee's the same. When Stuart Lee starts talking about bass players with a fall, and you just go, you just back away slowly a little bit, and you find a way. Just throw something on the floor, and out. But that's why I love. I think that's why Kieran and I probably get on so well, is because he does take things he is so intense about it.
yeah.
But what I love is that you would have shown the same enthusiasm and interest in what he wanted to talk about as you do in Disney songs and
to be fair, I also the one thing I love about you being on is that I know that I'm going to learn stuff. I feel like I know a lot about Laurel and Hardy. I know a lot about Disney songs and about Morecambe and Wise. But whenever you come on, it is an education, because you know so much more, and there's little tidbits of information that I would never have known. So they're the little golden nuggets that you get from hosting a podcast, and it's always an absolute pleasure to have you on, Kevin. Really is.
In which case, if my son Ed Knight does come on and talk about Star Wars, I'm going to listen. I'm going to be there while he record it, as you out-knowledge each other.
Oh God, then the pressure's on there. You see, pressure is.
But again, I learned things from Ed. It's like Ed. He was watching Dune. I came home recently. He was watching Dune, and I've not read the book. I've not seen the film tomorrow. And it's not because I don't want to. It's just it hasn't been part of my upbringing. But Ed says, "Oh, look at this particular scene," and he will show me a particular scene. And he'll just go from the actual way it's filmed and shot. He'll show me an angle and you go, oh, that's really interesting. And again, it's the same. It's a two-way street. I just love finding things out.
Yeah.
I love going, oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Let's go. I used to drive up my father-in-law, God love it, who I loved my father-in-law to bits. But he used to drive me, a very clever man. He was a Methodist minister, but he knew a lot of stuff. And we had similar interest in history and all of that. But we would be sitting around a table, and I would say something to him about London, for example, or the English Civil War. And he'd go, oh, really? That's interesting. And I would go into the front room, and he'd be checking it on. He'd be looking up in one of his books, all right, because he'd go, what do you mean? Just take my word for it. That's a fact. Yeah, I mean, but Ed does the same. Because Ed's too cool. If I say to Ed, if I throw in a fact about Oliver Cromwell on Ireland, Ed will top that fact.
Oh, will he?
Yeah, but again, I love talking to Ed. I love finding things out.
Yeah.
Especially about stuff that I haven't got a particular interest in that level of history or that particular film.
Yeah.
But if you tell me a fact about it, great, I'll take that. And it's part of my defence against getting older.
I think so.
I think when you stop being enthusiastic about stuff, or you stop learning about, if you stop listening to younger people about what they're into and what they're doing, you might as well stop. Stop.
You can never learn too much. That's the thing, isn't it?
Of course
you can never learn too much.
It's brilliant. I'm at that stage. It drives Ali, my wife, up the walls. I really want a grandkid now.
Yeah, right.
I just want a little princess of my own. I keep saying to her, I'll look after her.
Yeah.
But also I just love the fact that you've got a third generation that you're singing Laurel and Hardy songs to, and the fact that how brilliant it will be, how exciting for you when she's 3 or 4, and inevitably you'll force her to sit on your knee and watch the first Laurel and Hardy film, and she'll love it.
Yeah.
And then when she's 2 years older, she'll see it.
I've got her into Star Wars, so that she and
she's too young for Star Wars.
Oh no, she's not. No, she's not. She loves it. She absolutely.
Does she?
She absolutely loves it. She does.
Mate.
Yeah. Ray and The Force Awakens and BB-8 and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, before we do say our goodbyes, remember you can get the link to Kevin and Kieran's wonderful podcast in the show notes, as well as if you want to get in touch with us on email, the Patreon, episode links, merch, Linktree, all of that stuff. Just go to the show notes. It's all on there. Kevin, once again, it's an absolute honour and a pleasure to have you as a guest. So thank you so much. And I feel like that was a real trip down memory lane tonight.
Oh, great. Thanks for asking me. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody else, for watching and listening. And hardboiled eggs and nuts.